Morning, everybody. It is 7 o'clock here on Sky News. In fact, everywhere in the UK. Southport killer Axel Rudakubana will learn his fate today when he's sentenced for the murder of 3 children and trying to kill 10 other people.
Plus, the Defence Secretary warns that Britain will not shy away from robust action over Russian spy ships. We'll speak to the government in the next few minutes.
And also plan ahead warnings of fallen trees, power cuts and disruption to travel from Storm Ebb. We'll be speaking to an expert about your rights.
It's Thursday, the 23rd of January. The Southport killer will be sentenced today. Axel Rudakubana cannot be given a whole life sentence because he's under 21 when he murdered 3 little girls. Tens of thousands of people are forced to flee a new wildfire near Los Angeles. Also ahead, Thailand becomes one of the first countries in Asia to legalise same-sex marriage.
Hundreds of couples have tied the knot since the law came into effect just hours ago.
Here in the UK, weather warnings are in place with Storm Iwan set to batter the country with winds of up to 90 miles an hour.
If you go with snowflake storm, when the rivers freeze and summer ends.
If anyone is going to hold your attention.
And we'll be talking about the Oscars. The nominations are out at 1:30.
Beautiful, you can be ugly, but you can't.
Morning, everybody. The Southport killer Axel Rudakubana will learn his fate today when he's sentenced for 16 offences at Liverpool Crown Court. They include the murder of 3 children and the attempted murder of 10 other people. Analyst Silva Aguiar, Bebe King and Elsie Dot Stancombe were stabbed to death at a Taylor Swift-themed dance class last July. Alice Porter reports.
It's 6 months since these 3 girls went to a dance class and never came home. Elsie, Alice and Bebe were among the 13 people stabbed at the Heart Centre in Southport last July. The local community was devastated by their deaths. Axel Rudakubana was charged with murder and attempted murder. Quickly, misinformation spread online, leading to riots and violence across the country. Later, Rudakubana from West Lancashire was also charged with producing the toxin ricin and terror-related offences. As the trial was set to begin on Monday, he suddenly changed his plea to guilty on all charges. The victims' families wouldn't have to publicly relive the trauma.
There's a sense of relief, but there's also a sense of people want answers. People want to understand why it happened, especially why it happened in Southport, why it happened to our friends, our families, our kids, our community.
On Monday, details were released by police, which hadn't been made public before, in case it prejudiced the trial. At school, Rudakubana had been excluded for carrying a knife and also attacked a pupil with a hockey stick. 3 times he was referred to the government's anti-extremism programme Prevent. A public inquiry will be held into the attacks.
We must make sure the names of those 3 young girls are not associated with the vile perpetrator, but instead with a fundamental change in how Britain protects its citizens and its children.
Today, Rudakubana will be sentenced. It will be the first time details of the case, including his background, will be heard by the public. Sadly, youth was no defence for the 3 girls who lost their lives, forever missed by their families. Alice Porter, Sky News.
You can see Joshua is with us. Joshua will know more at 11 o'clock this morning after he changed his plea to guilty. This trial was due to start on Monday. The judge suggesting that it will be a life sentence, but not a whole life sentence.
That's right. The judge said it would be the equivalent of a life sentence because he was under 18. He was 9 days short of his 18th birthday at the time of these dreadful crimes. He will be sentenced to what's called detention during His Majesty's pleasure. And that just means indefinite detention. The judge, of course, has to set a minimum term, But because he is, normally you might well have had a whole life sentence, but you can't make a whole life order in the case of a person who was under 18 at the time the offence was committed. So what he will get is a minimum term, and no doubt very long.
OK, but to all intents and purposes, amounts to the same thing?
It amounts to the same thing, exactly so. I mean, the judge has to set a starting point, and if he'd been 18 for 2 murders or more, the starting point would be 30 years. Because he's 17 at the time, it'll be 27 years. But you can add to that, because of what are called aggravating factors, and there may be a reduction for what are called factors that are mitigating to reduce it. And then you come up with a total. And of course, it doesn't mean that's the sentence you'll serve. That's the minimum you'll serve before the parole board would consider whether you're safe to be released.
Would it be any clearer at the end of the day why he did it?
Well, there will no doubt be mitigation. We heard from his lawyers, who obviously weren't expecting him to plead guilty on Monday, that they will produce evidence of his mental health. They're not producing a psychiatric report, so no suggestion he's going to be sent to a secure hospital. But clearly he has had mental health problems. Whether that explains his behaviour is another matter. We don't know what he's been able to say to his lawyers. We don't know what they've been able to say to him. So it may not be much clearer, but the judge will go through the facts, he will go through the law, and then he will pass his sentence.
And the fact that he changed his plea to guilty, will that be considered to be a mitigating circumstance?
Yes, it will. You get a 20th off your minimum term for pleading guilty at the beginning of a trial. So if the minimum term was, say, 40 years, you might get 2 years off. Whether that really makes much difference in the context of such a long sentence is another matter.
Yeah. I wondered if you had a view on the Prime Minister saying that he couldn't tell us about the alleged... Oh, in fact, he's pleaded guilty to it. Yeah. The fact that he had the ricin and also he downloaded the Al-Qaeda manual because he felt that it would prejudice the trial.
I think the first point to bear in mind is that this manual was a document, one of thousands of documents which were found during a search of his computer and his bedroom and so on. It wasn't immediately obvious. It wasn't immediately obvious that he would be charged with the production of a biological toxin, ricin. This takes some time. This would have been considered by the Crown Prosecution Service. It's not actually an offence of terrorism, but it's an offence of possessing information that's likely to be useful committing or preparing an act of terrorism. So I think the prosecution service are entitled to have spent some time thinking about whether they were going to bring these charges before they were announced and before the charges were brought.
OK, for now. Thanks so much indeed, Joshua. Thank you. And we'll have special coverage on the sentencing of the Southport killer from 10 o'clock this morning. Meantime, Thailand has become the first Southeast Asian country to legalise gay marriage. Activists have been campaigning for the change for more than a decade. Cordelia, joining us live from Bangkok. A joyous day where you are.
Yes, indeed, Kay, a really joyous day, a monumental moment for so many here. Thailand only the third country in Asia behind Nepal and Taiwan to legalise same-sex marriage. And when you think of those within Southeast Asia, like Myanmar, Malaysia, Brunei, where gay relationships are illegal, this is hugely significant. Thailand wants to be seen to lead the way. It's been spurred on by a democratic movement, but today is not about politics for most here. It's deeply personal, the beginning of a new life and one that is far more equal. In a region where most nations continue to oppose gay rights, this is groundbreaking. Porsche and Arm have waited 17 years for this day. Finally, in Thailand, they can marry. What does this day mean to you?
Personally, I think it marks the beginning of equality in Thailand, and it also, in a way, inspires people to see that love is normal. Every love is the same.
Same-sex couples celebrating for the first time today will now have the same rights as heterosexual couples. something campaigners have fought over a decade for. At least 200 have registered to marry at this shopping mall in Bangkok. For Porsche and Arm, it is a monumental moment and milestone.
How significant does this feel?
What I feel now is the closeness between people and family. I can feel the bond between love, different kinds of love, like family love, friends love, and brothers, and even lovers.
Whoever you are, love is just love, L-O-V-E.
Thailand has long been seen as a relative haven for LGBT people in Asia. But it remains a conservative Buddhist society with a largely patriarchal family structure. And tolerance doesn't always translate to full acceptance.
How do you think it will change Thailand?
We need more and more, what should I say, acceptance from people who may believe something for their whole life, that this love must be this way and this way, that way. Give them some time, and then I truly believe that finally Thailand will change.
But Thailand has taken a critical step. Many close by refuse to, and it's already changing lives. There is a really upbeat atmosphere here today. People have been leaving their pictures on this tree behind me. There was a big joint ceremony when people got married, and you can see here, this is Mike and Carlos. They've just been married. They've been in Thailand for more than 10 years. And it's not just about the sentiment, the emotion of the day. It's also the practical changes and benefits that people will be able to access now when it comes to finances, medical decisions, things like loans as well, and adoption too. There is still room for movement, say activists. They want to see gender-neutral language enshrined in law when it comes to parenting, for instance, the use of the word parent to be adopted. Nevertheless, though, today I think is a moment when Thailand sees itself as really leading the charge, and it wants to become a haven for LGBT people and to be a place that is ultimately very welcoming.
Cordelia, for now, thanks very much indeed. Thank you. That's lovely, isn't it? Did you wear the same suits when you got married?
We did not wear the same suits. I was in kind of a lightish blue. Charlie had tweed, which looked stunning. He looked stunning. It was August 2022, and it was 36 degrees that day. So that was a day when actually linens would have been best placed. Yeah. But no, we didn't go for it. But no, congratulations, Lindy Duai. Lindy Duai is congratulations in Thai. Oh, for you. That's my little bit of research this morning for you. Yeah. Some of the day's other stories.
Yes, please.
Yeah, let's start with the US, shall we? More than 30,000 people have been ordered to leave their homes after a new wildfire broke out north of Los Angeles. NBC News reporter Liz Kreutz has the latest.
Well, hey there. Yeah, this has been a really fast-moving fire. When we first got here, it was over on the hillside. Then these flames made their way down here into this ravine. It burned this entire area. We were seeing 20-foot flames. It was moving acres per minute. But these fire crews have been able to make a huge assault on this fire, attacking it from the ground and the air. As you can see, this lagoon here, it's a good location because there's a lagoon here that the firefighters have been able to use to fill up for water drops. They've been able to attack as well using fire retardant from the air. All of that has helped them, try to get a handle on this fire, which has exploded to more than 8,000 acres here. You can see one of those choppers right here from LA County Fire going to do a water drop. The difference between this fire and the fires we saw 2 weeks ago, the Palisades and Eaton fires, is that this began in a much more rural area. Schools had to be evacuated, jails had to be evacuated, so it is threatening communities. But so far, thankfully, we aren't seeing entire communities engulfed in flames. That is because I think firefighters have been able to make such an aggressive attack on the fire. But again, as the winds pick up, the embers could spread, spot fires could spread, and so really this region maintains and continues to be very much on edge. Back to you.
Details there from Liz Kreutz. Other news this morning, we see you. That was the Defence Secretary's warning to Vladimir Putin after revealing a Russian spy ship's been snooping around UK waters. The Royal Navy tracking the vessel, which has passed through British waters twice since November. John Healey says the ship's been gathering intelligence and mapping the UK's underwater infrastructure. Several weather warnings across the UK to bring you now, lasting until Saturday. People have been told to expect travel disruption and power outages as Storm Airwin rolls in tomorrow.
No agreement. There was no agreement. No agreement. Make a lowering. Make a lowering.
Ireland poised to choose its new Prime Minister this morning after an unprecedented row put an end to yesterday's proceedings. Neil Martin was set to return to the post after a coalition deal struck last week, but the ceremony interrupted by arguments over speaking rights.
Prince Harry has settled. He said he never would. He has.
He has.
Tell me more.
I don't think it's the end, though, is it? This was his personal crusade, as we all know, and his team has said that the rule of law, as his lawyer said, must now run its full course. So what they effectively want to happen now are interventions from the police and also from Parliament. They're calling for investigations, I think, post-settlement, after what they say was unlawful activity admitted by NGN News Group newspapers, and what they describe Harry's team as perjury and cover-ups along the way. His lawyer said yesterday that lies had been laid bare and that the settlement proves that no one is above the law. But there were discrepancies between Harry's team's statement afterwards and NGN, in that NGN said that the Sun newspaper had not covered anything up or destroyed evidence back in 2010, and that's one of Harry's main claims against the newspaper. So it's not over, especially considering how personal Prince Harry takes all this.
Yeah, indeed so. And he's still got his case against the Mail?
Yes, I believe so, yeah.
OK, for now, thanks very much. Thank you. Looking at some of the front pages for you this morning, and of course they're focusing on Prince Harry settling his privacy case, just talking about that with Adele, the owner of the Sun newspaper, quoting the Duke, who described the win as historic. It's a similar front on the Eye. Its headline, Gotcha. The Prince forces his son to pay out. The Times splashes on the Royal Navy warning off a Russian spy ship in UK waters. The Daily Mail reports that a Royal Navy submarine surfaced close to the ship in a show of force. The Telegraph carries research suggesting that 1 in 12 London residents is an illegal migrant. And the Mirror reporting on the fatal stabbing of 12-year-old Leo Ross, with a 14-year-old under arrest on suspicion of his murder. The Housing Minister with us this morning, Matthew Pennycook. Always great to see you. Thanks for joining us. What are you going to do to get Britain building?
Well, as part of our Plan for Change mission to kickstart economic growth, we've been clear we're streamlining the delivery of nationally significant infrastructure projects. We made a number of changes to national planning policy last year to support that objective. We're taking further measures in the Planning and Infrastructure Bill later this year. And as part of that package, we're announcing today that we're reducing the number of judicial review permission attempts that are permitted from 3 to 2, but in cases without merit from 3 to 1, because we can't have spurious claims holding up these projects. And there are many, many examples I can give you, Kate, of where spurious claims have held up projects that are critical for our national infrastructure for many years. And that has a real-world impact on working people across the country in higher bills, longer commutes, pressures on water supply and the overall cost of development. So we're taking action.
OK, what about cynical cases? Just one attempt at a legal challenge for cynical cases. What constitutes a cynical case?
Well, the judge in each case can make that determination. But we know that there are spurious, cynical cases that have been brought forward. I could give you many examples. There was an A47 National Highways project, for example, where a former Green Party councillor brought a claim which the judge said, and I quote, had no logical basis, held up that project for 2 years. East Anglia Wind Farms, a group dragged through the courts for another 2 years, a case thrown out at every turn. So we think it's right, yes, obviously, that the public have the opportunity to challenge the lawfulness of government decisions. That's absolutely right.
But reducing it basically...
But reducing it to one challenge.
Yeah.
Yes, where, you know, in those cases where the court itself... Well, I'm not sure it will be most cases, but in cases where the court judges that it doesn't have a solid basis, 1 attempt, 2 in other cases, down from 3. We think that's fair. It will get the system moving. It will allow us to deliver that critical national infrastructure that's in the national interest, that will bring down people's bills, help with commutes, take pressure off water supply.
OK, what about environmental situation? What does that mean? Does it mean that you will be ripping up environmental rules?
We're not ripping up environmental rules, no. And as I said, if environmental groups want to bring...
one challenge.
Well, one challenge if it doesn't have a solid basis in the eyes of the judge in question. 2 if it does. But we're removing the initial paper application, if you like. As I've said,
wildlife surveys, what happens with those?
Wildlife surveys can continue to take place as they can. Yeah, we're not fundamentally in reducing the number of judicial review permission attempts, saying that your environmental obligations, part of the planning system, don't need to be met.
OK, do you agree with the Chancellor that growth trumps other things? Does growth, I don't know, trump net zero, for example?
I don't think it's about playing one of these off against the other. The Chancellor is absolutely right. We've been very clear about this from the moment we came into office. Growth is the #1 priority of this government and will remain so. But we're accelerating the drive to net zero, for example, through our plan for change, a clean power mission. So they don't need to be set off against each other, but growth is a priority when it comes to...
So you support the extension of Heathrow Airport?
I'm not going to comment on...
Why?
Because it's speculation, it's hypothetical. There's no application that's been submitted by Heathrow.
If there was, would you support it, given
I'm
that
not
growth
speculate.
Trumps everything?
Well, I'm not going to speculate on an application...
I'm just asking you what you would do.
...that hasn't been supported. I think what I could say in general terms, and I want to be slightly careful here, Kay, because there are quasi-judicial aspects to the DCO process, which my department has stewardship over this NSIP regime. I think what I'd say in general terms is any aviation project would have to demonstrate that it not only contributes to economic growth, but that it's compatible with our legally binding climate change commitments and that it meets high environmental standards around air quality and noise pollution.
Goodness, you've nailed your colours to the mast there, haven't you? Let's wait and see what happens. Is it frustrating that the Mayor of London is opposed to airport expansion around the capital?
I wouldn't say it's frustrating. The Mayor of London can take his own view on any particular proposal that comes forward. Well, look, I think this is often sort of set up as the straw man. We're not saying that people around the country can't object to planning applications, can't object to nationally significant infrastructure projects. What we're doing is streamlining the process so that when a challenge is brought, and in this case, the changes were announced today, a judicial review permission request, yes, that challenge can be heard, but it can't be heard repeatedly over multiple times in a way that adds years and years and huge cost to project, because we won't be able to deliver the critical national infrastructure our country needs if that is the case. And as I said, that has a real-world impact for people across the country in higher bills, in longer commutes, in pressure on water supplies. I don't think any of your viewers would want to see that happen. Everyone recognises, it's a moan I hear on the doorstep many, many times, that we can't get anything built in this country and we can't do it quickly enough. And that's right in many of these cases.
And
we're taking steps to ensure...
1.5 million houses,
we are, and we're going to determine 150 nationally significant infrastructure projects.
Let's see. What sort of punishment should be considered for sellers who don't check ID properly when it comes to selling knives?
Well, knife crime is a blight across the country. It's a horrific story in the paper this morning you've seen. I had an awful murder in Woolwich, in my constituency, 14-year-old child, Kaden Bakassa, just 2 weeks ago. I think this is an epidemic across the country. It's a moral mission for the government to halve knife crime. We're taking steps to do so, banning zombie knives, for example, doubling down on that commitment. And the Prime Minister has announced this week that we're taking steps to crack down on the online sale of knives, because in the case of Southport and others, young people have been able to buy knives online with relative ease, and we've got to take steps to address that.
Yeah, to that end, what should be considered as a punishment for sellers who don't check ID properly to make sure that the knives that are being sold either online or in store are being sold to the right people?
Well, the precise sort of enforcement mechanisms and punishments. I'm not going to get ahead of my colleagues who are introducing legislation to clamp down on this area. But we're very clear that we're going to clamp down and regulate online knife sales. And when we bring those measures in legislation this year, it will be very clear for the public to see what the penalties are for retailers that don't abide by those rules.
What would you like to see?
I'm not going to get ahead of what my colleagues... I'm sorry, but there's legislation...
Minister, you're here representing the government this morning.
And there's legislation that's going to be brought forward to address this very point.
I mean, pubs ultimately can be closed down if they sell booze to kids under 18.
But you would recognise, Kay, we've got to announce legislation in the House of Commons. I can't preempt what precisely is in that legislation on your programme this morning, I'm sorry.
OK. Is our military strong enough to take on the threat posed by Russia?
Yes, but we need to take steps to make it stronger. In terms of the incident that happened recently, we've been very clear this was a spy vessel. It was monitoring critical undersea infrastructure of the UK. We've declassified the information around that operation, including the surfacing of a Royal Navy submarine as a deterrent measure, precisely so that we can let Putin know that we know what he's doing, and there will be robust action that follows any threat to this country's security.
Do you want him to interpret that as a show of strength? Because, of course, there have been suggestions that our military is not fit for purpose at the moment and we need to invest more money in it. Certainly, this sort of story on the front page of the paper tells our foes that we're not to be messed with.
Well, and I think that's absolutely right. And the Defence Secretary in Parliament yesterday was very, very clear that we will take robust action to defend this nation's security, including our maritime borders.
And just a final thought on Southport before we let you go. Axel Rudakubana is going to be sentenced today. He can't get a whole life tariff because he was under 18 when he carried out these crimes. Do you have a thought?
Well, those are the sentencing guidelines. He can't get a whole life tariff, you're absolutely right. There are other charges that he's facing. I'm not going to get ahead again of the sentencing
I'm sure you
decision.
have a view on the case.
Of the sentencing decision that's going to... Well, it's...
Do you want to say a word for the families?
Horrific case, yes. And I think I would like to say, most importantly, aside of all the details around the sentencing guidelines and all that we could go into, it's going to be a very difficult day, not only for the families of the young girls who were so horrifically murdered, but the other families affected. And it will be a difficult day for them, not least because many of them are giving testimony, I understand, as part of that sentencing process. But let's see what comes out of the decision.
OK, it's good to see you. Thank you
very
much for joining us. Thank you. Still to come on The Breakfast Show for you here on Sky News Thursday morning. Ahead of the Southport killer's sentencing today, we'll speak to a former counter-terror detective. The latest on the weather bomb landing in the UK and how it'll impact you.
May thy knife chip and shatter.
Plus, will Timothée Chalamet earn his second Oscar nomination? We'll have all the details ahead of this year's nominations announcement.
It's like a football final with only one team on the pitch. This isn't just a call to vote, but a call to remember. The freedom fought for by the African National Congress.
I'm Yusra Al-Bagher, Sky's Africa correspondent based in Johannesburg, South Africa.
A cyclone and 2 burst dams wiped out hundreds of generational homes.
This was the second dam that the floodwaters hit before it tore into Derna. We are in the heart of Nairobi and we're watching as protesters were heavily tear gassed.
The sheer fearlessness and persistence of these guys is astonishing.
We help you understand the world with us. I remember going into the iconic Durman market in the heart of Sudan's capital for the first time since the war started. And this is what's left of it. Bullet holes through buildings, shelled balconies, bullet cases on the floor. I witnessed the complete destruction of a place linked to my childhood memories and the lives of millions of people. This is insane. This was a bustling residential area. So many friends who lived here. My most memorable interview was with a 15-year-old boy who'd survived being stranded on a migrant boat on its way from Senegal to the Canary Islands.
After 13 days, our food, water and fuel supply ran out.
I felt awe when we saw the mountain gorillas in Rwanda.
We call him the king of the jungle. This is the alpha silverback.
Sky News. Get the full story first. Yusra Al-Bagher, Sky News.
weeknights on Sky News.
This is your chance. Tell people. Welcome to the Politics Hub.
Our police force has apologised. If you want to find out about Grimsby, you come to the docks.
I'm live in Jerusalem.
Are you not concerned that that could lead to all-out war?
Hello there, good evening. There are fears of an upsurge in violence. What's at stake here?
You are watching the press preview, a first look at the front pages as they arrive.
I'm James Matthews, and I'm Sky's US correspondent, based here in Washington, D.C. Donald Trump, it would appear, is about to learn his fate. There's no doubting the strength of this hurricane as it roars through. Sky News, get the full story first. Do you fear a fourth indictment?
He's from Sky News. He's from Sky News. He's entitled to ask me questions.
It's live. Welcome back to the Breakfast Show. I was just saying get is a banned word. My newspaper editor when I was 17 said you can always use a different word rather than get. What? Well, it depends. Yeah, it depends. Lots of other words to use. Coming up, we're going to be speaking to a former counter-terror officer, head of the Southport killers, sentencing later on today. Also want to talk in more detail about what you heard from the Minister.
Yeah, but one thing that came out of that interview was this Heathrow debate. There was reports that the Chancellor is considering expansion Heathrow, which has been quite controversial, construction of a third runway. Now, campaign groups have called that disastrous, catastrophic. The Mayor of London continually has spoken against it, as you mentioned. But that you have the Minister there just saying that any aviation project should not only show growth but be compatible with legally binding climate change commitments and high environmental standards around air pollution. Now, while that seems like that there might be some trepidation there, I think the fact that he's happy to talk about it, and this is something the government did say yesterday, perhaps they have done those tests. I mean, Heathrow has said there will be strict tests on carbon, noise and air quality. So potentially this is the direction of travel. They are doing those impact assessments. As Chancellor said yesterday, growth is the #1 priority. It trumps everything, and perhaps Heathrow might get greenlit subject to these higher environmental standards.
OK, for now, thanks very much. Thank you. Rest of today's top story?
Yes, let's remind you of our top stories this morning. The Southport killer Axel Rudakubana will be sentenced today. The 18-year-old has pleaded guilty to murdering 3 young girls and attempting to murder 10 other people at a Taylor Swift-themed dance class last summer. Thailand has become the largest nation in Asia to legalise same-sex marriage. Hundreds of couples have tied the knot since the law came into effect. More than 30,000 people have been ordered to leave their homes after a new wildfire broke out north of Los Angeles. And several weather warnings across the UK for Storm Airwin, which came into force at 7 a.m. this morning. They will last until Saturday. Widespread travel disruption is expected.
The Southport killer is being sentenced today, but he's also the subject of a key question. Is he a terrorist? Nick Aldworth, former counter-terrorism national coordinator, joining us now. Hello to you, Nick. Thanks for joining us. What is your definition of a terrorist?
Well, it matters not what my definition is, it's the state's definition, and the line to that is the definition of extremism. And in both cases, the acts of terror have to be aligned to an ideology, i.e. you have to want to do something, you have to want to terrorise the wider population, or you have to want to impact and influence government policy. And you know, those crimes are reserved really for those people who wish to really undermine the fabric of our society. And
given what we saw in Southport and given what was downloaded onto this killer's computer, why would that not be a definition of terrorism?
Because it's not aligned to an ideology with the purpose of undermining the fabric of our society. I mean, it's extreme, it's abhorrent, it's vile, all those things that, you know, all of your listeners and watchers will be feeling. The simple reality is that the officers who operate things like the Prevent framework and the crimes that exist under the Terrorism Act of 2000, they have to sit within a framework of definition, and we can't sort of just go around making up what we think we want it to be just to match the circumstances of some awful act. But the reality is that this individual has committed 3 horrendous murders, and in some large practical aspect, it matters not whether those are terrorist murders or domestic murders. They nonetheless are horrent murders for which that individual can be sentenced in accordance with the court's guidelines.
Yeah, and we will see that from 11 o'clock this morning, extensive coverage here on Sky News. Do you think the Prevent programme, that is costing something like £48 million a year, do you think it's fit for purpose?
So I think the challenge around the Prevent programme is people wanting it to deliver something it's not designed to deliver. And, referring to my previous statements there around terrorism is ideologically driven. If you refer somebody into the Prevent programme that doesn't have an ideological foundation to their belief or their extreme belief, then the Prevent programme is not the place for them. Now, I really welcome this idea of a public inquiry because I hope that it will get really into the weeds of all of this. And what we've seen historically when we've had suggestions of failure around the Prevent programme is that actually there's a collective failing of society to intervene at a number of opportunities. And certainly from what's been reported on the media, that feels like the case here. Or sometimes the case doesn't even fit any of the criteria that we set for state intervention.
OK. How do you... I'm guessing it's almost impossible. How do you measure someone's obsession with a massacre of extreme violence, given that's the wording that needs to be taken into account, whether it's going to lead to them becoming a terrorist?
Well, like you say, that's really difficult to sit here and pontificate on. There's a reality check that people who are referred to the Prevent programme commonly espouse an obsession with violence or obsession with violent acts of others. And then when you sit down and you talk to them and you ask them why, for some there will be a cause. It will be, I believe in the downfall of Western society or some such obsession such as that. There'll be others who have just seen extreme violence, commonly on the internet, and we shouldn't hide away from that problem, and have just become obsessed with the idea of violence for the sake of violence and perhaps the notoriety that goes with that. What has been interesting over the last couple of years is that they have started to include school massacres as a separate category in Prevent reporting every year. And so clearly there is an eye to wider violence inside the programme. But at the moment, simple, probably the wrong word, acts of violence that stand alone and are driven by an individual's just obsession with violence for the sake of notoriety don't sit inside that programme.
OK. Nick, it's good of you to take the time to join us this morning. Thank you.
Welcome.
US President Donald Trump has given his reasons for pardoning the 6th of January rioters, including for those who attacked the police.
Most of the people were absolutely innocent. OK, but forgetting all about that, these people have served horribly a long time. It would be very, very cumbersome to go and look. You know how many people we're talking about? 1,500 people. Almost all of them should not have been, this should not have happened. And the other thing is this, some of those people with the police, true, but they were very minor incidents.
Police officers who were attacked by the mob that day have reacted angrily to the pardons.
I was beaten, crushed, kicked, punched, surrounded. Someone reached underneath my visor, tried to gouge out my eye. And all these people were just pardoned by Donald Trump, who says that they were the real victims, that they were the patriots. I don't understand how anyone can believe that.
In other news, more than 30,000 people have been forced to flee from a new wildfire in California. Los Angeles has been warned by an Olympics presidential candidate that the 2028 hosts need to be better prepared. It could be a problem.
It could be. Well, there's counting down to the Olympics and Paralympics in LA in 2028. Before then, they've got Men's World Cup matches and the Super Bowl. And amid all this, they've got to rebuild from the devastation. The question is, was LA prepared enough? And Johan Eliash is one of the 7 candidates trying to run the Olympic movement. He's a British-Swedish billionaire. And in an interview with me, he's raised concerns, reflecting perhaps some of the political debate in America about the lack of preparedness in terms of funding to deal with these types of emergencies.
Climate readiness for climate security issues is paramount. It's local governments, it's federal governments, wherever you go. And we need to make sure here that for future Olympic hosts that they have the capabilities to deal with it. And it's not only sports events. It is for cities, it is for communities to push governments for this.
And to push for investment, with those questions still about whether budget cuts in LA that impacted the response to the wildfires. Eliash is coming up against Seb Coe and various others for this role. He's the president of the International Ski Federation. In the interview, he's also talking about perhaps shifting how the future awarding of Olympic host works for the Winter Games, maybe rotating between 10 different hosts over 40 years, given the climate impact on where can even stage the Winter Olympics now.
It's interesting.
Yeah, he's and for the Summer Olympics, suggesting it should go to Africa for the first time, Middle East, India, he's raised. And quite interestingly, he is a friend of Prince Andrew, and he spoke to me in the interview about that. He said he's not financially assisting me anymore, but he is still a friend. He doesn't believe that association will impact his chance of getting votes.
Let's see. For now, thanks very much. Thank you. Still to come on The Breakfast Show for you here on Sky News.
It is a war, and you have to commit to a side.
The battle for Best Picture begins. Everything you need to know as Oscar nominations are announced today.
I'm Alistair Bunkle, Sky's Middle East correspondent based here in Jerusalem.
The only way into Gaza for us right now is with the Israeli military.
We've just reached the centre of Khan Yunis.
The IDF had brought us in to show us a tunnel network under a residential neighbourhood.
At the end of the day, it's war up the top. It's war down here.
Sky News, get the full story first.
We arrive. A secret hospital hidden in the Myanmar jungle, treating the victims of this bloody war. This is Myanmar today. Its military rulers don't want the world to see, but we have.
I fight for my own future. I fight for my generation's futures.
This is an actual crime.
They don't care for that.
Myanmar army is only a couple of kilometres away.
So this is a major humanitarian disaster.
I'm Martin Brunt, and I'm Sky's crime correspondent. My most memorable story was, and still is, the disappearance of Madeleine McCann.
Please, please do not hurt her. Please give our little girl back.
We aim to be the best and most trusted place for news.
For detectives, the first 48 hours after a murder are crucial in the search for clues. The public expects them to find Jill Dando's killer soon.
I remember the grimmest case, the Soham murders of schoolgirls Holly and Jessica. I felt I can't undo what's happened, but I can help explain it.
Ian Huntley was arrested and charged within a fortnight of the murders.
My biggest challenge was to persuade a jailed diamond thief to answer my letters. Martin Brunt, Sky News, at the Old Bailey.
Migrants risk their lives climbing aboard these trains in search of a dream, the United States.
It's really dangerous. They often get robbed on this train.
They suffer a lot, by police, cartels.
What happens to them next, we just don't know. Do you miss your mum?
With Trump coming to the presidency, how much longer will people be accommodated?
The journey you've been through, it's been very difficult at times. Has it been worth it?
See. This is a journey which goes by one name, the Beast.
There's always more to the news than a headline. We want to discover, to delve a little deeper
To find out what's really going on, explanation, analysis, the people at the heart of every story. I'm Neil Patterson, and this is the Sky News Daily Podcast. So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
Hello again, everybody. Welcome back to The Breakfast Show here on Sky News. Thursday morning. Storm Iwan has arrived this morning. What is it going to do? Simon Cole, the travel editor for The Independent, is with us. Where do we need to worry?
Well, the weather warning has already started today. Yellow wind warning, and that covers pretty much anywhere on the entire coast from Llandudno in North Wales, going anti-clockwise all the way around Wales, all the way around southwest England, all the way along the south coast as far as Ramsgate. So if you're in that area, you're going to be in trouble. Tomorrow it gets even worse. As you can see on this picture, basically the entire UK is covered by weather warnings. It's wind and snow in the south. In the north, it's wind and rain in the south, wind and snow in the north, and then you can see that big area covering the whole of Northern Ireland, southern Scotland, North Wales and northern England. And that is for high winds, and already we are seeing a lot of travel organisations putting out warnings about travel tomorrow.
Yeah, we don't seem to cope well travelling, do we, when it's bad weather?
Well, I think the weather is getting worse. It used to be that you might get something like this every couple of years. Now it seems to be almost every couple of weeks. And you might remember over Christmas, we had all kinds of disruption due to high winds, hundreds of flights cancelled at Heathrow, fog causing problems, particularly at Gatwick and Manchester. And so, I'm afraid travellers have to get used to the idea that there is a non-zero chance that your journey is going to be disrupted, particularly this weekend.
While we're talking about Heathrow, etc., do you expect the Heathrow expansion to go ahead?
Well, that's a good question. I've been covering the Heathrow expansion since quite deep into the 20th century. And it was actually 20 years ago that the then Transport Secretary, Alistair Darling, said, doing nothing is not an option on Heathrow and general airport expansion in southeast England. Since then, of course, we've done absolutely nothing, except that the amount of air traffic has grown. Heathrow, the busiest two-runway airport in the world, Gatwick, the busiest single runway airport, and London, the world capital of aviation. British Airways boss Luis Gallego, head of their holding company IAG, came out yesterday and said that they would not support any increase in runways at Heathrow. He said because they want to charge too much, it's already too expensive. But actually, of course, the background is that British Airways has the majority of slots at Heathrow, and it wouldn't do if they had a third runway. Monumental objections, of course, from environmental groups. Everybody from those who live near the area worried about more aircraft noise, worried about the increase in congestion from traffic and environmental and air quality, all the way through to people saying climate change, you cannot possibly expand aviation if you are going to meet net zero targets.
I bet they do, though. Let's wait and see. Certainly, we got a hint from the Minister this morning that potentially it could go ahead. If not Heathrow, then where?
Well, Gatwick is the easy win. Gatwick, of course, the second busiest airport, much smaller than Heathrow at the moment, about half the size. But the thing that Gatwick can do is bring into use its standby runway. Now, this has been in place for decades, but normally it's just used in emergencies or when they're doing stuff to the main runway. By moving that 12 metres north, they can create a whole new runway for actually what in airport expansion terms is pretty much small change. And that would come into effect before the end of the decade, unlike Heathrow, where you wouldn't see anything until the early 2030s, even if you started building tomorrow, which you're not going to. So Gatwick says, we can take the strain, we can
Is the infrastructure in place, though? I mean, I used Gatwick recently. It's certainly not as slick as it is at Heathrow.
Well, it's quite a busy old place, and it's grown quite interestingly, and it would be good to see how they are going to improve the actual terminal experience and also the transport links. It is, as you say, very busy, and even if you were there in winter, well, my goodness, wait until summer.
Right, fair enough. Talk me. I was looking the other day, there was a story in the papers about the e-visa system. What is that for foreigners coming in? And it's not working properly, is it?
No, OK, and let's park the electronic travel authorisation, which is what you need if you're coming here on holiday, and the entry-exit system, which is what you need, which is not going to happen for going to Europe yet, and the ETIAS. So the e-visa is basically saying to people who have the right of residence, who are coming here to work, yes, you can come in. Over the night on New Year's Eve going into New Year's Day, it was supposed to be a complete change from the old physical proof that you had a visa to a new e-visa system, which the government says is going to be much more secure. Unfortunately, the system crashed on New Year's Eve because so many people were trying to get to it. And now, while the government has said, OK, for the next 3 months, first 3 months of this year, you can use your old expired proof that you're able to come in, a lot of people are reporting that when they're trying to fly in, the airlines are saying, oh, we don't really know about that. It says it's expired. You're not getting on the flight. So that's got very, very messy, and it's caused a lot of stress to an awful lot of people who have perfectly legal right to be here.
What should they do? People watching this morning who...
There is a helpline that you can call. The trouble is, of course, you turn up at some random airport abroad and say, I'm flying to London or Manchester, they won't necessarily be fully cognizant of the problems that have been had here. They will just be looking at a document which says it's expired, even though it hasn't, as the government now says. So it's very messy, very stressful. But if you're a British traveller or you're coming here on holiday, you don't need to worry about the e-visa.
OK, and one other thing that caught my eye when I knew you were coming on, the Spanish Prime Minister suggesting that he's going to completely ban non-resident Brits from buying homes in the country.
Yes, I don't think he was singling out the UK. He was singling out anywhere that isn't in the EU, because he can't actually do that. And I think it's perhaps, Kay, the old trick of blaming foreigners for all the domestic problems. In fact, British property owners don't tend to live in the sorts of places that Spanish people want to live in. There is a huge problem with property and finding enough places for people to live in Spain, but that tends to be in places like Barcelona, where so much has now been given over to apartments on platforms such as Airbnb. And actually, since Brexit, since we decided to limit ourselves to a 90-day stay, there's almost an opposite problem, which is a bit of a property slump as Brits try and offload their properties in order to perhaps find somewhere where they can stay throughout the entire winter.
Yeah, so take that, Socialist Spanish Prime Minister. It's completely comprehensive, as always. Great to see you. Thanks very much indeed, Simon. Thank you. Countdown to the Oscars. It's the biggest night for Hollywood. Should we get more? It's the 97th Academy Awards this time. Let's get more with Katie, should we? Hi, Katie. What should we talk about? Best Picture.
Best Picture, yeah. Look, it's a really hard field to predict this year because there are so many good films that have come out within the last 12 months. Conclave dominated at the BAFTAs. It's up for 12 BAFTAs. It is based on the Robert Harris novel, a hugely popular novel that sold in its millions. People really enjoying the cinematic version of this story about a group of gossipy priests who are trying to select the next pope. That dominated at the BAFTAs, as I said. But I suspect it's going to be the more sort of American favourites that we will see nominated by the Academy a little later on. Things like Emilia Perez, about a trans drug cartel boss who kidnaps a lawyer to enlist, that he essentially enlists to help him go through gender realignment surgery. As well as that, I mean, it has got some standout performances. It's one of those ones where the acting is perhaps a little better than the actual story itself. But Emilia Perez certainly is getting a lot of attention. Lots of critics are talking about that and tipping that to be one that will dominate the conversation at this lunchtime when we find out what's nominated, as is The Brutalist, this 3-hour 25 film, which is about a Hungarian architect played by Adrian Brody, who is Jewish, who is restarting his life after the Second World War. The performances in this are just absolutely stunning. It's as I say, over 3.5 hours, but it doesn't feel long at all. It is pacey. It's told through this this vehicle of sort of using this building that's being erected and designed by Adrian Brody's character. It's very interesting. It's very different to most things that you will see out there at the moment, and it has some stunning performances. And as well as Adrian Brody, who's being tipped for Best Actor, Felicity Jones is likely to be up there for Best Actress as well. She plays this character who has osteoporosis after being in a concentration camp. She can't walk. It's an incredible performance that she gives. And I caught up with her on the red carpet last week, actually, and brought up the fact that she's being tipped for so many awards this season.
It's great. The more, you know, the more attention it gets, then the more people will see it, which is fantastic.
Yeah. That's the great thing about the recognition in sort of these prizes is that more people will then get to come and see it, which, you know, independent films kind of need, really.
Mm.
That gave you a chance for a breath there, didn't it? What about Demi Moore? Is it her year?
Look, it's one of those things. Demi Moore being nominated for The Substance. She certainly seems to be nominated for a lot of things. She's won the Golden Globe as well. If you've seen The Substance, which is now available to stream, it is one of those films where I think the idea is perhaps a little better than the actual execution itself. But as is often the case with the Oscars, sometimes when it's your year, it is just your year. And in her Golden Globe speech, Demi Moore spoke about the fact that she's felt that she had been written off as this popcorn actress. She'd been told, in fact, that she was unlikely to sort of get cast in these big films again. And I think it is the story that a lot of people will enjoy seeing. A lot of the times with the Academy Awards, people prefer the sort of narrative that unfolds over the next few months of this actress really is deserving of it because she hasn't been getting much work. So yeah, I suspect she is going to be the one that will come away with Best Actress in the end.
OK, we'll leave it there for now. Thanks very much indeed. We'll find out a little bit later on who's got the nods and who hasn't. Have you seen Conclave?
I have not.
Have you seen it?
No.
No. I thought it was boring.
Oh, really? Why?
Because I fell asleep. That's why.
Fair enough. That's your review on the poster, isn't it? I fell asleep.
Yeah, honestly, it just didn't do it for me. But there we go. Each their own. Coming up in just a few moments' time, all today's top stories for you here on Sky News, including the Southport sentencing.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. A new start to Sunday.
I'm ready. Are you?
Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
morning, everybody. It's 8 o'clock. Southport killer Axel Rudakubana will learn his fate today when he's sentenced for the murder of 3 little girls and trying to kill 10 other people.
Plus, the Defence Secretary warns that Britain will not shy away from robust action over Russian spy ships. We'll speak to military analyst Colonel Simon Diggins.
And a planetary parade, 6 planets lining up in the night sky. We'll be asking an expert how to see it.
Yep, it's Thursday, the 23rd of January. The Southport killer will be sentenced later on today.
But he can't be given a whole life sentence because of the age he was when he murdered the 3 little girls.
More than 30,000 people forced to flee a new wildfire near Los Angeles. Also ahead, Thailand becomes one of the first countries in Asia to legalise same-sex marriage.
Hundreds of people have tied the knot since the law came into effect just a few hours ago.
If you go with snowflake storm, with the rivers freezing, summer ends.
And we'll be talking about the Oscars. The noms are out at 1:30. Good morning, everybody. A terrible day for the families in Southport this morning. Killer Axel Rudakubana will learn his fate when he's sentenced for 16 offences at Liverpool Crown Court. They include the murder of 3 children and the attempted murder of 10 other people. Alice de Silva Aguiar, Bebe King and Elsie Dot Stancombe were stabbed to death at a Taylor Swift-themed dance class last July. Alice Porter reports.
It's 6 months since these 3 girls went to a dance class and never came home. Elsie, Alice and Bebe were among the 13 people stabbed at the Heart Centre in Southport last July. The local community was devastated by their deaths. Axel Rudakubana was charged with murder and attempted murder. Quickly, misinformation spread online, leading to riots and violence across the country. Later, Rudakubana from West Lancashire was also charged with producing the toxin ricin and terror-related offences. As the trial was set to begin on Monday, he suddenly changed his plea to guilty on all charges. The victims' families wouldn't have to publicly relive the trauma.
There's a sense of relief, but there's also a sense of people want answers. People want to understand why it happened, especially why it happened in Southport, why it happened to our friends, our families, our kids, our community.
On Monday, details were released by police, which hadn't been made public before, in case it prejudiced the trial. At school, Rudakubana had been excluded for carrying a knife and also attacked a pupil with a hockey stick. 3 times he was referred to the government's anti-extremism programme Prevent. A public inquiry will be held into the attacks.
We must make sure the names of those 3 young girls are not associated with the vile perpetrator, but instead with a fundamental change in how Britain protects its citizens and its children.
Today, Rudakubana will be sentenced. It will be the first time details of the case, including his background, will be heard by the public. Sadly, youth was no defence for the 3 girls who lost their lives, forever missed by their families. Alice Porter, Sky News.
Martin's with us outside Liverpool Crown Court. Sentencing starting, I think, about 11, Martin?
11 o'clock, yes, and what we won't get, because there isn't going to be a full trial, are the full details of the police investigation, but we will get a short version of that and an idea particularly of the sort of material online that Rudakubana was looking at in the lead up to those attacks. This may be an opportunity for the Crown Prosecution Service lawyer who will give this outline of the police investigation to perhaps provide some of the answers to those vital questions about all those interventions that were done over the past few years with him that weren't followed up, so much so that nothing was done to stop those attacks. So we'll get an idea of the police investigation. We'll get victim statements. Some of the families of the girls who died and others of the girls who were injured will get a chance to read out statements. Some will be read in person by the victims and their surviving family members. Some will be read by lawyers. The defence barrister will have a chance to offer some mitigation. He or she will have an opportunity to try to limit the sentence that the judge will deliver, but it's going to be a life sentence. He can't be given a whole life sentence because you have to be 21 or older to qualify for that, but he will be given a minimum sentence before which he won't be able to apply for parole. So he'll have to do a certain number of years in jail before he can ask for parole, and that's inevitably going to be a very, very long time. And then probably by about lunchtime, the judge will start explaining the sentence, how he's arrived at it, and then perhaps by early afternoon, we will all know exactly what that sentence is going to be.
OK, will we ever know why he did it?
I think it's very unlikely. The prosecutors, the police, other people who were engaged with him have already said that they have no idea, other than his obsession with extreme violence, and this really does go to the core of this argument, his overarching argument. Why wasn't it ever designated a terror incident, even though he was charged with one terror offence, the possession of an Al-Qaeda training manual? Well, the answer from the authorities is that they could not identify a particular ideology. The definition of a terror attack is the use of violence or the threat of violence in a cause, political, religious. They identified nothing like that. All they were able to derive was this was a young man who was obsessed with extreme violence and online had watched reports and read documents about genocide, about Nazi Germany, about mass shootings. I suppose one thing that we might get from the prosecutor is, again, one of those core issues about the 3 times he was referred to the government's anti-terror prevent programme, but that wasn't pursued on any of those occasions. And we understand that one of those referrals was based on his interest in mass school murders. It might be an opportunity, perhaps should be, for the Crown prosecution lawyer to explain why those referrals to that anti-terror programme was not pursued.
OK. For now, thanks very much indeed, Martin. Thank you. And we'll have special coverage on the sentencing of the Southport killer from 10 o'clock this morning here on Sky News. Just want to show you these pictures. They are from California, north of Los Angeles, to be precise. These are live pictures that we're just receiving here at Sky Centre. It's a new, fast-moving wildfire which erupted in Los Angeles County, prompting tens of thousands to evacuate a region already reeling from the most destructive fires in its history. It's the Hughes fire, ignited about 45 miles northwest of the city of LA yesterday morning, near Castaic Lake, in a mountainous area that borders several residential areas and schools as well. It grew very quickly indeed. 30,000 people have been asked to vacate their homes for now. It's only 14% contained, is what we're being told. The new fire located north of the 2 mammoth blazes, which are still burning, by the way, that destroyed multiple neighbourhoods in the Los Angeles area earlier this month. Local news saying that residents near the Hughes fire hosing down their homes and gardens with water, and others rushing to evacuate their neighbourhoods. But as you can see, it is still very much alight, as the fire service would say. Only 14% contained. 30,000 people have been forced to relocate for now, and others trying to douse their homes with water to try to keep the flames at bay. Thailand has become the first Southeast Asian country to legalise gay marriage. Activists have been campaigning for the change for more than a decade. Cordelia standing by for us. We were saying in the last hour, Cordelia, what a wonderful day it must be there.
Yeah, incredibly celebratory. We've witnessed more than 200 couples marrying here at a shopping mall that's been transformed in Bangkok. Thailand is really leading the way within Southeast Asia, in stark contrast to some of its neighbours like Malaysia and Myanmar, where gay relationships are criminalised. I think in part the progress is the product of the democratic movement, but it's also about a lot more than politics, particularly today. This is personal for so many, and it's the start of a new life and a more equal one.
In a region where most nations continue to oppose gay rights, this is groundbreaking. Porsche and Arm have waited 17 years for this day. Finally, in Thailand, they can marry. What does this day mean to you?
Personally, I think it marks the beginning of equality in Thailand, and it also, in a way, inspires people to see that love is normal. Every love is the same.
Same-sex couples celebrating for the first time today will now have the same rights as heterosexual couples, something campaigners have fought over a decade for. At least 200 have registered to marry at this shopping mall in Bangkok. For Porsche and Arm, it is a monumental moment and milestone. How significant does this feel?
What I feel now is the closeness between people and family. I can feel the bond between love, different kinds of love, like family love, friends love, and brothers, and even lovers.
Whoever you are, love is just love, L-O-V-E.
Thailand has long been seen as a relative haven for LGBT people in Asia. But it remains a conservative Buddhist society with a largely patriarchal family structure. And tolerance doesn't always translate to full acceptance. How do you think it will change Thailand?
We need more and more, what should I say, acceptance from people who may believe something for their whole life, that this love must be this way and this way, that way. Give them some time, and then I truly believe that finally Thailand will change.
But Thailand has taken a critical step. Many close by refuse to, and it's already changing lives.
It's been very moving spending the day here. I just came across two women who have been together for 32 years. They feared they'd never reach this moment, and yet they have. And it means not only that they get to enjoy this celebration, but of course those critical rights when it comes to the law, to be able to adopt together, to make decisions for each other if they need to in the case of an emergency, to be able to get loans together, to get properties. These are things that people have been pushing for. Now, I think one of the paradoxes that you see in Thailand is that it's long had this reputation of being incredibly welcoming to the LGBTQ community, and yet the law has been out of step with that. Well, now it has caught up. There are still things that activists want to see change. For instance, the language around being a parent rather than a mother and a father. They haven't got that quite yet. But I think this certainly is a day where those that have fought for it can say that Thailand is leading the way in their region in a way their neighbours simply haven't.
OK, for now, thanks very much indeed. Thanks a lot. How do you feel about gay men getting married and wearing the same suit?
Not quite for me.
No.
Also, there's
What
about
did you do?
we went for blue and kind of tweed. There's also about a 6-inch height difference between us. So I think it would have looked quite kind of juxtaposed. So we went. I think if you're similar height, similar, you can kind of lean into it. But not for Charlie and I. We kind of went our own separate ways. It was also 36 degrees. So shout out to Charlie wearing tweed in the middle of summer. But it looked fantastic.
Have you thought about linen?
We did and discounted it.
OK.
Yeah. Anyway. You know, the choices. The pictures are great, that's what matters.
Exactly that, exactly that. Talk to me about what's happening in California.
Yeah, a new wildfire in California. This is the Hughes fire. It's grown to about 9,200 acres, fuelled by winds of 20 to 30 miles an hour. It's about 45 miles north of Los Angeles. Obviously, the two other major fires, the Eaton and the Palisades, continue to burn. As yet, no properties have been affected by this new fire, the Hughes fire, but 30,000 people have been ordered to leave. Let's get more details from NBC News reporter Liz Crutz.
Well, hey there. Yeah, this has been a really fast-moving fire. When we first got here, it was over on the hillside. Then these flames made their way down here into this ravine. It burned this entire area. We were seeing 20-foot flames. It was moving acres per minute. But these fire crews have been able to make a huge assault on this fire, attacking it from the ground and the air. As you can see, this lagoon here, it's a good location because there's a lagoon here that the firefighters have been able to use to fill up for water drops. They've been able to attack as well using fire retardant from the air. All of that has helped them, try to get a handle on this fire, which has exploded to more than 8,000 acres here. You can see one of those choppers right here from LA County Fire going to do a water drop. The difference between this fire and the fires we saw 2 weeks ago, the Palisades and Eaton fires, is that this began in a much more rural area. Schools had to be evacuated, jails had to be evacuated, so it is threatening communities. But so far, thankfully, we aren't seeing entire communities engulfed in flames. That is because I think firefighters have been able to make such an aggressive attack on the fire. But again, as the winds pick up, the embers could spread, spot fires could spread, and so really this region maintains and continues to be very much on edge. Back to you.
More details, more images as we get them here on Sky News. Let's bring you up to speed on some of the day's other stories. The Chancellor expected to use a speech on growth next week to support the proposed third runway at Heathrow and endorse expansion at Gatwick and Luton. The Housing Minister, Matthew Pennycook, told this programme any expansion project needs to show it will boost the economy and complies with government's climate change commitments.
I think what I could say in general terms, and I want to be slightly careful here, Kay, because there are quasi-judicial aspects to the DCO process, which my department has stewardship over this NSIP regime. I think what I'd say in general terms is any aviation project would have to demonstrate that it not only contributes to economic growth, but that it's compatible with our legally binding climate change commitments and that it meets high environmental standards around air quality and noise pollution.
There are several weather warnings across the UK lasting until Saturday. People have been told to expect travel disruption and power outages as Storm Airwin rolls in tomorrow.
No agreement. There was no agreement. No agreement. Make a lowering.
Ireland poised to choose its new Prime Minister this morning after an unprecedented row put an end to yesterday's proceedings. Neil Martin was set to return to the post after a coalition deal was struck last week, but the ceremony was interrupted by arguments over speaking rights.
Prince Harry said he would never do a deal, but he did.
He did, but it was never about the money for him. He did get what he wanted despite not having his day in court because he got that apology, didn't he? And that specific apology directly for his mother, Princess Diana. And we know that that has been a major part of this personal crusade for him on this. Of course, it won't be the last we hear from him. As you said before, he has another case pending against the Daily Mail next year. I believe that's going to be coming about. But In terms of what his team has said, what happens now, they are basically saying that the rule of law must take its course. They want to see interventions from the police and Parliament now. They're calling for investigations after what they say was unlawful activity admitted by news group newspapers, what they describe as perjury and cover-ups along the way. It'll also be interesting to see what we hear, if anything, from Rebecca Brooks, the chief executive of News UK, because, of course, she was cleared of any wrongdoing back in 2014. But the statement, again, from Harry's and Lord Watson's lawyers was that at her trial, she said she was editor of The Sun and they ran a clean ship. They're now saying that they admit that she was editor, that they ran a criminal enterprise. So it'll be interesting to see what happens, if anything, if there will be any repercussions legally after this with regards to the authorities.
So I'm trying to draw a line under it, though. Victoria Newton, the editor, I think, writing to the rest of the team yesterday and saying that they all have her full support. OK, yeah, for now. Thank you. The World Economic Forum in Davos is continuing today with President Donald Trump due to make a virtual address this afternoon. Our business and economics editor, Paul Kelso, is standing by for us in Davos. Hi, Paul. So what's the plan?
Morning. Yeah, the plan is, Kay, that at 5 o'clock local, 4 o'clock your time, Donald Trump will beam in to Davos by some kind of video link to what I anticipate will be a full conference hall here, despite the fact he's not here in person. And he will be interviewed by the chief executive of the World Economic Forum. I'm told there'll be, the plan is to have some chief executives potentially lined up to engage in a dialogue. Whether that will happen, whether they'll get a word in, we'll have to wait and see. But this whole meeting, the annual gathering of political and business leaders, investors, people from civil society in the third sector, it's been overshadowed by Donald Trump's inauguration on Monday and the fire he's lit, frankly, under the American economy. Here, since I pick up, certainly in Europe, UK as well, Rachel Reeves is here drumming up investment, but among European leaders and businesses, this sense of the difference between America, where Donald Trump is looking to energise the economy, and in Europe, where growth is slow, where there's regulation, where there's a great deal of talk about how to do things better, not a lot of action. Comparison, perhaps overnight, we've seen Donald Trump bring together three massive tech investment funds and companies to announce a $500 billion investment in AI infrastructure, while in Europe they're still talking about safety and regulation. There's a very clear difference. Now, whether all those words turn to action, we'll have to wait and see, as ever with Donald Trump. But he will be here this afternoon telling the World Economic Forum what he thinks the world should look like.
OK, for now, thank you. Now, the Royal Navy is closely monitoring a Russian spy ship after it was spotted around UK waters earlier this week for the second time in 3 months. So what on earth is going on? Let's bring in Defence, Security and Military Analyst Simon Diggins. It's always good to see you, Simon. Thanks for joining us. We had a submarine that was sent to the area, one of ours, and warned the Russians off. What are they up to?
What they've been doing is spying on our undersea infrastructure, whether it be gas pipelines, internet pipelines, and everything that goes there. We're very much connected to the continent in terms of those things. And what the Russians have been doing is observing those. When this submarine warned them off last November, they were right over one of our areas of critical infrastructure. And that matches the other activity in other areas, including, as we know, attacks on, or presumed attacks by Russians using proxies on similar infrastructure in the Baltic, which took place. One of the attacks took place on Christmas Day. So this is they've identified an area of key vulnerability for the UK, and they're working out how they could attack it in the future.
Generally, we don't like people knowing where our hunter-killer, are they? The submarines are. Yeah. So we must have thought it was sufficiently serious in order for its position to be made aware to the Russians.
Absolutely. I mean, I think the description of the Ministry of Defence was this was unprecedented, and I think that's a very good word. I mean, normally you try and use a patrol vessel, as they're doing at the moment. The same vessel, the Russian vessel, the Antar, is currently moving through British waters and is being guarded by and shadowed by surface vessels. But when it surfaced when the submarine surfaced in November, that was, as you say, an unprecedented thing to do. But they were right over, as I understand it from the reports, a critical part of our infrastructure.
OK. And what would have happened? I mean, obviously you weren't there, but how would those communications have gone?
They're remarkably polite. I mean, the John Healey reporter said that good morning, but actually the same thing happens in the air. Russian aircraft are continually probing UK airspace, and there's a sort of code of conduct between both sides. There are common channels, radio channels, which they can communicate with each other, and these exchanges are very polite. They're very clear, but they're very polite. And I think they make it very clear to them that it was time to move on from where they were. And as I understand it, when the submarine surfaced, wished the crew of the Yantar good morning, and then the Russian crew moved out the area pretty quickly. So I think that was the message was got across very, 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 very clearly, but politely.
And why do you think we would have used a sub rather than a patrol vessel?
Well, that might well be because we had nothing else available. I mean, that's the real worry. I mean, one of the things that we've got is this issue that John Healey actually was honest about in November when he said that UK can't defend itself. It may well be the specific things about what the Antar was actually doing, but it may well be the only vessel that was available. And that points to a fundamental critical deficiency in our defence. We know we're not spending enough money on defence, but we can't even defend our homeland at the moment. And that seems to me to be an absolutely essential prerequisite of a safe and secure country.
OK. Simon, always great to see you. As I said, thank you very much. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Still to come on The Breakfast Show for you here on Sky News Thursday morning. Ahead of the Southport killer's sentencing today, we'll speak to a former Old Bailey judge. The Planets Align will tell you how to spot this rather special parade in the sky.
You're green.
I am. Something is. And could Wicked be up for an Oscar? We'll tell you what to expect from Hollywood's most prestigious film awards.
It's like a football final with only one team on the pitch. This isn't just a call to vote, but a call to remember. The freedom fought for by the African National Congress.
I'm Yusra Al-Bagher, Sky's Africa correspondent based in Johannesburg, South Africa.
A cyclone and 2 burst dams wiped out hundreds of generational homes.
This was the second dam that the floodwaters hit before it tore into Derna. We are in the heart of Nairobi, and we're watching as protesters were heavily tear gassed.
The sheer fearlessness and persistence of these guys is astonishing.
We help you understand the world with us. I remember going into the iconic Omdurman market in the heart of Sudan's capital for the first time since the war started. And this is what's left of it. Bullet holes through buildings, shelled balconies, bullet cases on the floor. I witnessed the complete destruction of a place linked to my childhood memories and the lives of millions of people. This is insane. This was a bustling residential area. So many friends who lived here. My most memorable interview was with a 15-year-old boy who'd survived being stranded on a migrant boat on its way from Senegal to the Canary Islands.
After 13 days, our food, water, and fuel supply ran out.
I felt awe when we saw the mountain gorillas in Rwanda.
We call him the king of the jungle. This is the alpha silverback.
Sky News. Get the full story first. Yusra Al-Bagher, Sky News.
Weeknights on Sky News.
This is your chance. Tell people. Welcome to the Politics Hub.
Our police force has apologised. If you wanted to find out about Grimsby, you come to the docks.
I'm live in Jerusalem.
Are you not concerned that that could lead to all-out war?
Hello there, good evening. There are fears of an upsurge in violence. What's at stake here?
You are watching the press preview, a first look at the front pages as they arrive.
I'm James Matthews, and I'm Sky's US correspondent, based here in Washington, D.C. Donald Trump, it would appear, is about to learn his fate. There's no doubting the strength of this hurricane as it roars through. Sky News. Get the full story first. Do you fear a fourth indictment?
He's from Sky News. He's from Sky News. He's entitled to ask me questions.
Hello again, everybody. Welcome back to The Breakfast Show here on Sky News. We've just been looking at this fire, another wildfire that's broken out in California, around about 45 miles or so northwest of Los Angeles, where the other two fires were. 30,000 people have been asked to evacuate from their homes. At least for now, some residents, we're told, are spraying water onto their properties to try to keep the flames at bay.
You can see there the searchlight of a helicopter just hovering overhead. The water coming down from that helicopter, obviously a vitally important part of tackling this fire. And that's the good news for the firefighters, is that the winds are about 20 to 30 miles per hour. So the aerial tackling is possible. When the Palisades kicked off, 90 to 100 miles an hour, they couldn't do any of this.
Doesn't look as though it made much impact there,
No, I should imagine it will take many sorties to get it under control. But they do say, quotes from fire authorities in the region do say that this blaze is different to the ones we've seen in previous weeks.
Yeah, a couple of schools potentially at risk, so there'll be no school today for those youngsters. It's not thought to be the same sort of fire or in the same sort of built-up areas. So although 30,000 people have been asked to leave their homes, at least for now, goodness, look at that, it's thought that it doesn't really have the potential at this stage for the loss that we saw with the other two fires further south.
The Eaton and Palisades fire obviously consuming huge areas of land, thousands of properties, leading to scores of deaths as well. So far, we're being told that no properties have been affected by this fire, the Hughes fire, but we'll keep across it, won't we?
We certainly will. It must put fear in the hearts of so many people on the west coast of the United States, though, when they see stuff like this happening.
And to think also that it is the 23rd of January. Yeah. And as authorities have said there, as Gavin Newsom, the governor of California, has pointed out, there isn't really a fire season anymore in the United States, certainly in this part of the US. It's prevalent all year round. It used to be an issue for the summer, but now droughts, higher temperatures, stronger winds, the Santa Ana winds that have fanned the flames previously are much more prevalent and are really leading to some widespread devastation.
Yeah, and we were chatting to Rob earlier, actually, and he was telling us that as a result of what's happening in Los Angeles, where the Olympics are supposed to be hosted a little bit, in 2028, in fact, that they don't know whether that's going to be able to go ahead or not.
No, it's hugely difficult to plan for individual lives, let alone the world's biggest sporting event, that kind of main focal point of 4 years for just so much of the world. And you look at these scenes and go, if you're trying to plan contingency, mitigation, anything of that scale, really difficult, Rob, to be able to put it into action.
Just talk to us about these pictures, Rob, if you would, please, and the fact that there are some challenges as to whether or not LA will be fit to host the LA Olympics.
Yes, there's no news of venues being damaged yet, but think of the infrastructure that needs to be rebuilt, the homes that have been lost in the widespread devastation, communities that have been totally destroyed. And against the backdrop of that, we just know from here in London how much work is required to prepare for an Olympics. And while it's only 2025 and the Games are in 2028, well, that is quite a short time frame because there are other events. They've got World Cup football matches next year. They've got the Super Bowl in 2027 as well. And it has put this focus, which I've been talking to those in the Olympic movement about, how prepared a city is for these sorts of emergencies. And it really has magnified perhaps that debate in LA about the funding, the tens of millions cut to prepare the fire service to deal with these types of instances, and questions over whether that contributed to the fire spreading.
And we're going to talk about that in more detail later on, but thanks for the update on that. What else have you got?
Let's remind you of some of our other top stories, shall we, this morning. The Southport killer, Axel Rudakubana, will be sentenced today. The 18-year-old has pleaded guilty to murdering 3 young girls and attempting to murder 10 other people at a Taylor Swift-themed dance class last summer. Thailand has become the largest nation in Asia to legalise same-sex marriage. Hundreds of couples have tied the knot since the law came into effect. And there are several weather warnings across the UK for Storm Eowyn, which will last until Saturday. Widespread travel disruption is expected.
Let's get more now on that sentencing that we'll see from Liverpool a little bit later on today with the Southport killer. He was He was 17 when the attack happened, so he won't get a whole life tariff?
That's right, Kay. You can't impose a whole life tariff on someone under the age of 18, and it's very rarely done between 18 and 21. It really bites for people 21 and over.
What other options are available?
Well, the judge doesn't have any option as to where he starts. I'm going to name a figure. Don't panic, it changes. But the figure at which he starts is 12 years. That is for one death committed by a 17-year-old. But that figure doesn't represent things like the fact that a knife was taken to the scene, that there was a lot of preparation, quite meticulous preparation for what went on, the fact that there were 3 deaths, the fact that there were 10 attempted deaths, the ricin, the manual, all of these things will be built into that final figure, and it will go up a very long way from 12 years.
Do you think he will ever be released?
The way in which it works is this. On a murder sentence, the judge doesn't have to assess how dangerous someone is going to be at the time of release, because the judge doesn't name a time of release. Unlike any other sentence, what the judge is doing is saying, this is how long you must serve before you can apply to the parole board for release. But a life sentence, which is what he will get, means that he may never be released. The question of whether he will lies in the hands of the parole board, and they will make that assessment at the time when this young man, and he will by then be a middle-aged man, I suppose, makes the application to the parole board. And then they'll look at a lot of things, including a lot of psychiatric evidence.
Will him pleading guilty, albeit at the 11th hour, be taken into account?
It will be taken into account, but the reality is that it will make comparatively little difference. Murder isn't like other offences where for an early plea you get a straight 1/3 off. There's a very strict maximum as to how much you can get off, even for an early plea of guilty. This one came about as late as it could come. So yes, it will be mentioned, you can expect to hear it mentioned, but it will not figure largely in the final calculation.
Will we ever know why he did it, do you think?
Well, that rather depends on what happens in the future. But at the moment, we certainly don't. We hear a lot about what went on beforehand, and it's plain that nothing was done to stop him. That's another matter altogether. I don't think that you will hear Mr. Justice Goose talk about his responsibility, about the young man's responsibility for not having been stopped. The fault there lies with other people, and we know that the government is planning on looking at that, as we have heard before in other cases.
It's not for the judge, I'm guessing, Mr. Justice Goose, to say whether or not this was terror-related.
You might hear him make some reference to it, but I don't think that this is really being regarded as that sort of case. Clearly, this defendant had interests that embraced that, but it's quite clear that he wasn't ideologically motivated. And I think really this is just the most appalling act of uncontained, gross violence.
When you're sentencing and handing down the sentence, how do you manage to keep the emotion out of it?
Well, Julian Goose will be very, very used to dealing with this, and he will have given this the most enormous amount of thought, consideration. He will listen to everything that's said in court today, but he will have been forewarned of it in the sense that, for example, the impact statements from parents and so forth will have been in writing before him, earlier on, and he will have planned meticulously what he is going to say, always ready to make adjustments for what happens in the courtroom, but he will know what he has to cover. Sometimes it is very difficult to contain those emotions.
What about afterwards?
Well, we're all people. You get off the bench, you take off the robes, underneath you're a person.
It's difficult, isn't it?
It's very difficult. No one said the job was easy.
Okay. And as far as the impact statements are concerned, the families will get their opportunity to speak today?
They will. Not everyone wants to. Sometimes people make a written statement and would prefer for the prosecuting barrister to read it out on their behalf. Very often they do want to stand in the witness box and look at the defendant and read out the effect of what's been done. But you know, really, Kay, how do you put into words the effect of what has happened in Southport?
I can't even begin to imagine what they're going through. If there's any crumb of comfort for the families, it's that they don't have to live through a trial. But apart from that, look at those little faces.
Yes, yes.
Poor little things. OK, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank
Really
you.
appreciate you taking the time. Thank you. Let me tell you about one of the leading rioters during the 6th of January insurrection. They've been freed from prison after Donald Trump commuted his sentence. Stuart Rhodes founded an extremist group called the Oathkeepers. Rhodes was convicted of seditious conspiracy in the attack and given an 18-year sentence, though he hadn't entered the capital himself. Our correspondent James Matthews caught up with him.
Of all the places that you could have come today, you've come to the capital. Is that an affront to the people who were injured?
I used to work here.
And people who died?
No. The people who died were Trump supporters that day. I'm sure they
police officers who subsequently died?
They didn't die as a response from January 6th. The officer that died afterwards died.
With respect, that's what you say. Others, with respect, that's what you say.
No, that's what the coroner showed. Reality. Yeah, it's the reality. Yeah.
What did you do if you did not organise January 6 riots? Right. What did you do? What did that mean? We're not getting through this without a civil war.
What I was saying is you have to have fair elections, and I wanted President Trump to use his authority to declassify any information he could on the corrupt deep state. That's what I want to see him do now, and I think Kash Patel's going to do that. I've heard him talk about using that power and authority, so I want to see that done to expose them. And
we're not getting through this without a civil war.
If you don't have fair elections, yes. But that's protected free speech.
January 6 wasn't free speech. It was a riot, an alleged insurrection. Crowds rampaged through this place.
I did not. Neither did my men.
You were convicted of organisation of
I was convicted in a show trial drawn from a jury that was part of the victim pool. They would not let us have venue change. The judges described the people of D.C. as the victims and then insisted on drawing the jury pool from the victim pool. You're not going to have a fair trial.
Do you accept that if you aren't public enemy number one, you're a close second?
No, not at all. This is ridiculous. I'm done. See ya.
Sky has a new documentary out now, King of the Apocalypse, which centres around Rhodes' actions that day.
My entire life has been spent preparing for the end times. My father, the man the feds consider to be one of the masterminds of the January 6th riot, and founder of the now infamous Oathkeepers, was Elmer Stewart Rhodes III. From inside our world, he was heroic and was going to save America from the end of the world.
Let's just update you on what's happening with this California wildfire, the latest fire that's broken out about 45 miles or so north of where the two previous Eaton and Palisades fires raged. These are the latest pictures that we are receiving. It looks pretty bad, doesn't it? But we are being told that although 30,000 people have been asked to evacuate from their homes, at least for now, property is not likely, we're told by the fire service, to be impacted to the same level that we saw with the previous two fires. Pretty spectacular this morning, though. We'll keep an eye on that. One has to wonder about the Olympics being held in Los Angeles in 2028, several major sporting events before that as well, and a major candidate to be the next president of the International Olympic Committee, has stood by his friendship with Prince Andrew, talking about that as well. So lots to talk to Rob about this morning. Hi, Rob. Let's deal with the fire first and the challenges that may be in place for those that want to host these major sporting events over the next few years.
Yeah, obviously a city that hosts the Olympic welcomes more than 10,000 athletes, thousands of coaches, and of course many hundreds of thousands of fans. And if you think about LA now, looking at some of the areas where homes have been destroyed, they need to rebuild the city, and it's a city that relies heavily on its roads as well, and that infrastructure, and to bring in all the necessary work to rebuild the city. Now, not the entire LA area is affected. If you sort of look south, for instance, to sort of Manhattan Beach, I know people there, they are not impacted, but certainly in some of these areas we're seeing...
There has to be a question as to how regularly these fires are going to break out.
Yes, and it raised the whole issue of climate change, particularly how it intersects with sport as well. Perhaps often the focus is on the Winter Olympics, but on the Summer Olympics, the heat that can impact cities. And here, dealing with wildfires. And, you know, one of the International Olympic Committee presidential candidates I've been speaking to, Johan Elias, talking about the need for better preparedness to deal with these emergencies. And so much the focus in LA has obviously been on the tens of millions of budget cuts to the fire department. You know, we saw our own David Blevins challenging the mayor of LA just a couple of weeks ago about some of those questions. And now LA has a huge task to rebuild and to also get the city ready. Now, it's not a city that needs a lot of new infrastructure for the Games. And in fact, one of the selling points for LA was the fact it's a Games without having to build a lot of new things, as we saw, say, here in London with the Olympic Park in Stratford. But now they do have a sort of monumental building operation on their hands, just for the people of LA.
Yeah, the guy that you were mentioning there, wasn't he the bloke that was mates with Prince Andrew?
Yes, in fact, Johan Elias was a director of the Prince's pitch at the Palace, the entrepreneur scheme. Yeah, that was paused. That one, yeah. Obviously, in the wake of that disastrous interview about the convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. Now, Mr. Elias's business dealings are back in the headlines because of scrutiny over a company he set up with the Duke of York and his use of the name Andrew Inverness on Companies House. Now, the anti-monarchist group Republic has made a complaint to the police saying a false name has been used. Mr. Elias has insisted it's not a pseudonym in any way because he's using his Earl of Inverness title, that's a reference to. And this is the first time Mr. Elias has spoken about that business, which he says is actually an endeavour that was a charitable endeavour it was aimed to be. And he's spoken to me about his friendship with Prince Andrew and whether it could damage his bid to become boss of the Olympics.
I highly doubt that people will pay that much attention to it because, as I said, he's an old friend, and that's it. And this was for a very good cause.
Are you still a friend standing by him, helping him?
I'm still a friend, yeah.
Mr. Elias saying he's no longer financially assisting him. He's certainly got a lot of cash. He's a billionaire made through the sportswear firm Head.
Oh, there we go. For now, thanks very much indeed. Still to come on The Breakfast Show for you here on Sky News Thursday morning.
They should just let me be.
Let you be what?
Whatever it is they don't want me to be.
Who will Hollywood deem worthy of Best Picture? Everything you need to know coming up.
I'm Alistair Bunkle, Sky's Middle East correspondent based here in Jerusalem.
The only way into Gaza for us right now is with the Israeli military.
We've just reached the centre of Khan Yunis.
The IDF had brought us in to show us a tunnel network under a residential neighbourhood.
At the end of the day, it's war at the top. It's war down here.
Sky News. Get the full story first.
We arrive. A secret hospital hidden in the Myanmar jungle, treating the victims of this bloody war.
This is Myanmar today. Its military rulers don't want the world to see, but we have.
I fight for my own future. I fight for my generation's future.
This is an actual crime.
They don't care for that.
Myanmar army is only a couple of kilometers away.
So this is a major humanitarian disaster.
I'm Martin Brunt, and I'm Sky's crime correspondent. My most memorable story was, and still is, the disappearance of Madeleine McCann.
Please, please do not hurt her. Please give our little girl back.
We aim to be the best and most trusted place for news.
For detectives, the first 48 hours after a murder are crucial in the search for clues. The public expects them to find Jill Dando's killer soon.
I remember the grimmest case, the Soham murders of schoolgirls Holly and Jessica. I felt I can't undo what's happened, but I can help explain it.
Ian Huntley was arrested and charged within a fortnight of the murders.
My biggest challenge was to persuade a jailed diamond thief to answer my letters. Martin Brunt, Sky News, at the Old Bailey.
Migrants risk their lives climbing aboard these trains in search of a dream, the United States.
It's really dangerous. They often get robbed on this train.
They suffer a lot by police, cartels.
What happens to them next, we just don't know. Do you miss your mum?
With Trump coming to the presidency, how much longer will people be accommodated?
The journey you've been through, it's been very difficult at times. Has it been worth it?
See. This is a journey which goes by one name, the Beast.
There's always more to the news than a headline. We want to discover, to delve a little deeper, to find out what's really going on. Explanation, analysis, the people at the heart of every story. I'm Neil Patterson, and this is the Sky News Daily Podcast. So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
Hello again, everybody. Welcome back to The Breakfast Show. Let's talk about these planets that are all going to align in the night sky in the next couple of days. Dr. Francisco Diego is here with us. Good to see you. Tell me what it is and where we can see it.
Well, there's a lot of misconceptions here. It's not exactly in 2 days. We have seen these planets in the sky for a couple of weeks at least, and they will be visible for another month or more. It's very exciting, actually, because we have, especially, I don't know, we have some images that I sent. I don't know, we can put the images in a minute.
We will, yeah.
So, but you see, we were looking at Saturn, very faint, then Venus, extremely bright, in the west.
Can we see this, Dan, maybe?
Yeah.
Here we go.
On the right here in the screen, we have seen Saturn, very faint there, and above it is Venus.
Yes.
And then on the left, as we move, we can see the constellation of Orion at the bottom with Orion's belt. Yep. And above that, we see Jupiter in the middle. And then on the left, we see Mars in the constellation of Gemini. So you see the alignment. There is a line that goes there. Yep. This is one of the pictures that should be visible. I think this one is the one in February. This picture particular is the one in the beginning of March, right, when the moon is coming and then Venus is going away. Venus is going to come in front of the sun, more or less, and then disappear from the evening sky. But these pictures are it's a simulation from the computer, and they are simulating the sky today, at the beginning of February, and then the beginning of March. The object we see in this particular one was the moon that is coming to join this parade in the beginning of February and also the beginning of March.
OK, so if I head out at the weekend and in the back garden, will I be able to see that?
Absolutely, yes. Saturn will disappear. It's very faint and it's pointless. But when you see Venus, as I was looking at last night when I was coming back from the cinema, yes, Venus had already set. It was 10 o'clock or something. You have to see this early in the evening. So,
just as it goes dark? As
the sun sets, 6 o'clock. These images were taken at 6 o'clock, simulated for 6 o'clock tonight. And at the beginning of February, the one on March is at 7 o'clock because the sky gets darker later because we are coming into the summer.
And this is just the northern hemisphere?
No, it will be everywhere in the world, almost everywhere in the world. And you see them with the naked eye. I mean, you just have a look up there, and the first thing you see up there, you're looking to the west. These pictures were taken facing south. Yes. You're looking on the right, you will have Venus, the brightest thing in the sky. Then you have Jupiter. Even if it's partially cloudy, you will see Jupiter. It's extremely bright, as we saw in these simulations. And on the left of Jupiter, you see Mars. It's important to notice the difference in color. Venus is very white. Jupiter is a little bit yellowish, but Mars is definitely red-orange.
yeah.
And you can see the difference when we see Jupiter and Venus. The point is that we see all of them at the same time in the same sky.
Well, I see the International Space Station across it as well.
Yes, I don't have the predictions, but yes, if it comes as bright as Jupiter or as bright as Venus in some cases. You can see the space station as well.
Amazing. I'm going to do that at the weekend. Thank you so much for telling me what to do.
Yes.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Thank you.
It's a pleasure.
Katie, 97th Academy Awards. Tell me who's up for it.
Talking of stars, look, Conclave was the one that dominated BAFTAs when we had the nominations for those last week. We suspect that the Robert Harris novel, the film version of it, is going to be probably not the one leading the field. I think everyone is predicting that it's going to be Emilia Perez or The Brutalist, the films that people are talking about a little later on today. Emilia Perez, it's a hard-to-define film all about this trans drug cartel boss, and it's a musical crime caper, a really sort of interesting take on that. The Brutalist, this 3.5-hour film about a Hungarian Jewish architect restarting his life in America after World War II, are both really interesting and unusual films. So it'll be interesting to see how many they end up being nominated for later.
OK, and what about Demi Moore?
Demi Moore, look, this does seem to be, the mood music seems to be playing in Demi Moore's favour this year. She won the Golden Globe, and in her Golden Globe speech for the winning for The Substance, she spoke about the fact that people had written her off and described her as a popcorn actress that couldn't really act. She didn't think she'd be cast in a film, a leading role like this. I think people that would be voting for her in the Academy, she's likely to be a name that features quite heavily because she's a popular character in Hollywood, and it's a really interesting horror film.
And Hugh Grant?
Hugh Grant, look, he took us by surprise in the BAFTA nominations last week. If you want to bet on an outsider a little later on today, the name Hugh Grant is one to look out for. Again, a horror film for The Heretic. That's our sort of British hope up for Best Actor. I don't think he'll end up winning because Adrian Brody is fantastic in The Brutalist, but it'll be interesting to see whether he gets a nomination.
OK, 1:30, we will hear that. Any appealing there for you?
I just hope that Demi gets it after this much conversation. I just hope it comes to fruition.
And you don't go to the movies?
No, I've got young children. I prefer sleep. I choose sleep.
We'll be back in just a couple of minutes' time. All today's top stories. Stay tuned.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. A new start to Sunday.
I'm ready. Are you?
Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
morning, everybody. It's 9 o'clock. The Southport killer, Axel Rudakubana, will learn his fate today when he's sentenced for the murder of 3 children and trying to kill 10 other people.
Plus, the government warned that Britain will not shy away from robust action over Russian spy ships. We'll speak to senior Labour MP Emily Thornberry.
And the bishop branded nasty by Donald Trump says she won't apologise. We'll be talking about when it's right for the clergy to speak out.
It's Thursday, the 23rd of January. The Southport killer will be sentenced today at Liverpool Crown Court.
But he can't be given a whole life sentence because of the age he was when he murdered the 3 little girls.
More than 30,000 people forced to flee a new wildfire near Los Angeles. Also ahead, Thailand becomes one of the first countries in Asia to legalise same-sex marriage.
Hundreds of couples have tied the knot since the law came into effect just a few hours ago.
If you go with snowflake storm, when the river's freezing, summer ends, rain is gonna win it.
And we'll be talking about the Oscars. The nominations are out at 1:30. Good morning. The Southport killer, Axel Rudakubana, will learn his fate today when he's sentenced for 16 offences at Liverpool Crown Court. They include the murder of 3 children and the attempted murder of 10 other people. Alice de Silva Aguiar, Bebe King and Elsie Dot Stancombe were stabbed to death at a Taylor Swift-themed dance class last July. Martin Brunt is outside Liverpool Crown Court for us. Hello to you, Martin. Sentencing starting at 11.
It will, and what we're going to get after that is a précis, or a short version of the police investigation, essentially the case against Rudakubana. Because there isn't going to be a trial, we're not going to get the kind of detail that we would have got, and the cross-examination of that detail over, the 3 weeks or so that the trial was expected to last. But this is the opportunity for the Crown Prosecution Service to lay out what the police discovered and perhaps answer some of those still unanswered questions about the detail of the material that he was looking at for so long online, the stuff of extreme violence, the genocide footage, documents about Nazi Germany, mass school shootings, that kind of thing that fueled his obsession with violence. We should also hear perhaps more about his interaction with the many agencies over the years, and maybe some idea of why none of that led to any further interaction that might have addressed early on those issues that culminated last July in that mass attack on those little children. Perhaps we'll hear more about those 3 referrals that were made by the education authorities to the government's counter-terror programme, the Prevent programme, and why none of those 3 referrals really led to any further engagement that, again, might have addressed what was going on in his mind and what led to the attack. And perhaps we'll get some explanation, again, one of the other big unanswered questions, why this wasn't designated a terror attack, and why even now that he's admitted a terror offence, the possession of an Al-Qaeda training manual, the authorities still don't treat him as a terrorist, although, of course, he is a convicted terrorist. It's no wonder, I suppose, that the public are confused about that particular issue. All of that might get a bit more of an explanation in the perhaps a couple of hours of the outline of the case by the Crown prosecution lawyer. So we're going to get that. Then we're going to get victim statements. So families of those who died have an opportunity to tell the judge how it's affected them. So too the families of the girls who were attacked and survived. Then it's the chance of Rudakubana's defence lawyer to offer what mitigation they feel that they can, perhaps to try and limit the sentence that he's going to get. But he's going to get a life sentence or a number of life sentences. The key thing will be how many years he'll have to serve before he can apply for parole, the so-called tariff. And that's going to be very, very long. But the judge cannot give him a whole life sentence because of his age. There are certain qualifications for people to be given whole life sentences, and one of them is you can't be given a whole life sentence if you're under 21. Rudakubana, of course, was 17, a few days short of his 18th birthday when he committed these crimes.
OK, for now, thank you. Well, in the last hour, I talked to a former Old Bailey judge, Wendy Joseph, about what to expect from the sentencing.
Can't impose a whole life tariff on someone under the age of 18, and it's very rarely done between 18 and 21. It really bites for people 21 and over.
What other options are available?
Well, the judge doesn't have any option as to where he starts. I'm going to name a figure. Don't panic, it changes. But the figure at which he starts is 12 years. That is for one death committed by a 17-year-old. But that figure doesn't represent things like the fact that a knife was taken to the scene, that there was a lot of preparation, quite meticulous preparation for what went on, the fact that there were 3 deaths, the fact that there were 10 attempted deaths, the ricin, the manual. All of these things will be built into that final figure, and it will go up a very long way from 12 years.
Do you think he will ever be released?
The way in which it works is this. On a murder sentence, the judge doesn't have to assess how dangerous someone is going to be at the time of release, because the judge doesn't name a time of release. Unlike any other sentence, what the judge is doing is saying, this is how long you must serve before you can apply to the parole board for release. But a life sentence, which is what he will get, means that he may never be released. The question of whether he will lies in the hands of the parole board, and they will make that assessment at the time when this young man, and he will by then be a middle-aged man, I suppose, makes the application to the parole board. And then they'll look at a lot of things, including a lot of psychiatric evidence.
Will him pleading guilty, albeit at the 11th hour, be taken into account?
It will be taken into account, but the reality is that it will make comparatively little difference. Murder isn't like other offences where for an early plea you get a straight 1/3 off. There's a very strict maximum as to how much you can get off, even for an early plea of guilty. This one came about as late as it could come. So, yes, it will be mentioned. You can expect to hear it mentioned, but it will not figure largely in the final calculation.
And we'll have special coverage on the sentencing of the Southport killer from 10 o'clock this morning. Chaps are here to talk with us about what's going on with these wildfires to the north of Los Angeles. Another one has broken out. It's about 45 miles north of the previous 2 fires. 30,000 people have been asked to leave their homes, at least for now, although there is some suggestion that it's not likely at this stage to be on the level that we saw with the Palisades and Eaton.
No, it grew really quickly. 50 acres when first reported, 5,000 acres within 2 hours. But before 10 p.m. local time, and it's now about 1 in the morning there, about 10 p.m. in the evening, they'd reached 14% containment. Local media say 4,000 firefighters are assigned to this incident, and that it's been the ability to tackle it from the air because the wind speeds are about 20 to 30 miles an hour, which has allowed them, they say, to consider this kind of very different to the Palisades when the wind speeds then in the initial days were 90 to 100 miles an hour.
Which was fanning the flames as well as not being able to fight it from the air. But we just saw that chopper there, as you saw, not making much impact to start with. It's going to need many of those sorties in order to dampen down these flames. As we were saying, 30,000 people have been asked to move. For now, only 14% contained is what we're being told by the fire service. And this is a problem for the potential Olympics that are presently scheduled for LA in 2028, Rob, but also there's some big sporting events before then. This fire will, of course, be out by then, but one wonders about other fires coming along and, you know, what that might mean going forward.
Yeah, it raises questions about the impact of the climate. You know, we don't know the necessary cause of these, but in terms of how LA deals with such emergencies, questions over the funding that was reduced to the fire department and the rebuilding operation. Now, LA is preparing not only for the Oscars in a few weeks' time, but if we look to next year, the biggest football event on the planet, the Men's World Cup, games will be in LA. Then we've got the Super Bowl, the biggest fixture in the NFL calendar, coming to the city in 2027, then all building up to the Olympics and Paralympics in 2028. One of the reasons that they rewarded the games perhaps was because they didn't need to build lots of venues. There was less risk in terms of that, but they were still planning, and still are, $7 billion in new infrastructure, including to the transportation system and various other facilities within the city. Well, on top of all that, they've now got to rebuild all those devastated areas as well, in a city that does have challenges with its transportation system at the moment in terms of getting around the place. And it shows perhaps that major event disaster planning wasn't a key factor when they're preparing for these games, but certainly it seems it should be now.
Yeah, I don't know how anecdotal it is, but apparently rebuilds are only insured up to $3 million in California. So if you had a property that was more expensive than that, it's gone.
And many of those homes will be. And between the Eaton and the Palisades fires, at least 16,000 structures have been destroyed by those flames. 16,000.
Yeah, and these are the latest images of another fire that has broken out yesterday morning. Quickly took hold, as you can see. Only 14% contained is what the fire service is telling us. But as you were also mentioning there, the helicopters can fly and dump the water in the areas that are needed most, Gareth, because the winds are not as strong as they were.
Yeah, and they've got two options there with the helicopters, well, three really. First of all, the visuals, being able to see the spread and get that aerial view. Secondly, they can use water to tackle flames. And thirdly, that pink fire retardant that we've seen being dropped as well over the last couple of weeks, they can use that to create fire breaks. So rather than trying to put the fire out, you let it burn out where it already is, but you stop it from spreading further. So what they try and do is work ahead of the flames to contain them, and that's why we're getting this 14% figure at the moment. That was at about 10 p.m. in the evening. That was about 4 or so hours ago. And they'll, you know, when the day comes, they'll reassess and reevaluate. 4,000 crew members currently assigned to this as well.
But it's so early in the year, and one wonders, you know, what else might the people of Los Angeles have ahead of them?
And we've been talking for years and years and years about the droughts in the state and in the region, and the impact of climate change and the impact of different weather patterns, and the fact that reservoirs, there's been so many images of boats left high and dry in reservoirs tens of feet lower than they should have been. And that was one of the big criticisms of the authorities with regards to the Eaton and Palisade fires of the last couple of weeks, of water resources that were available to go and tackle these fires. In the end, we saw images of Canadian aircraft scooping water out of the Atlantic and then taking it and pouring it on land. Well, then you also have the impact of, yes, you've got fire, but you've now got salt water being poured onto land, and that will have its own impacts too.
Absolutely.
And the air quality as well.
Absolutely. And as you said, the Olympic authorities and the other major sporting bodies will be looking at this and wondering, you know, whether in the future they can hold events here in places where it could go up in flames.
And some very often look about the scrutiny placed on other parts of the world, maybe in Africa or the Middle East when they hold major sports events, and how they can deal with high heat, in particular the climate. Well, this is showing in the second biggest city in the US how it's challenged and struggles to deal with an outbreak of wildfires, and not even being in the summer as well, the impact of the high heat as well. And the candidate I've spoken to for the International Committee presidential election, Johan Eliash, has been reflecting on some of that domestic political debate in the US about whether or not they put enough funding in to deal with emergencies like this, and certainly saying they need to up their game, building up to LA 2028.
Climate readiness for climate security issues is paramount. It's local governments, it's federal governments, wherever you go. And we need to make sure here that for future Olympic hosts that they have the capabilities to deal with it. And it's not only sports events. It is for cities, it is for communities to push governments for this.
And those communities which will have the Olympics taking place around them when they'll be trying to rebuild their lives perhaps still. How long will it take to rebuild as the world's sports stars and fans all go and descend on LA in, 3 years' time? Might not seem a long time, but it's a lot of work to do.
Yeah, they're heading that way. Lots of people living in LA at the moment are heading in exactly the opposite direction. For now, thank you. Other news, Thailand has become the first Southeast Asian country to legalise gay marriage. Activists have been campaigning for the change for more than a decade. Cordelia Lynch joins us now live from Bangkok. Joyous day it is, I'm sure, there.
Yeah, very joyous day, Kay, and a bit of an unusual setting, it must be said. We're in a shopping mall in Bangkok at the moment, and people have been queuing up to get their pictures taken. We've seen hundreds of couples tying the knots. Some of them have waited decades for this day, and campaigners have fought vigorously for more than 10 years to get this critical bit of legislation. Thailand is unique in Southeast Asia, the first country to legalise same-sex marriage. And even in broader Asia, you only have 2 other countries that have done the same. And I think part of what has led to the progress here has been political, because you've had a big push from the democratic movement in the last few years. But everything you hear reflected upon at the moment in the last few hours from people is personal, because this is a day when they can start a new journey and when their relationship feels a lot more equal.
In a region where most nations continue to oppose gay rights, this is groundbreaking. Porsche and Arm have waited 17 years for this day. Finally, in Thailand, they can marry.
What does this day mean to you?
Personally, I think it marks the beginning of equality in Thailand, and it also, in a way, inspires people to see that love is normal. Every love is the same.
Same-sex couples celebrating for the first time today will now have the same rights as heterosexual couples, something campaigners have fought over a decade for. At least 200 have registered to marry at this shopping mall in Bangkok. For Porsche and Arm, it is a monumental moment and milestone.
How significant does this feel?
What I feel now is the closeness between people and family. I can feel the bond between love, different kinds of love, like family love, friends love, and brothers, and even lovers.
Whoever you are, love is just love, L-O-V-E.
Thailand has long been seen as a relative haven for LGBT people in Asia. But it remains a conservative Buddhist society with a largely patriarchal family structure. And tolerance doesn't always translate to full acceptance.
How do you think it will change Thailand?
We need more and more, what should I say, acceptance from people who may believe something for their whole life, that this love must be this way and this way, that way. Give them some time, and then I truly believe that finally Thailand will change.
But Thailand has taken a critical step Many close by refuse to, and it's already changing lives.
We've witnessed so many special moments today. My focus and Nanon over there have all married. I think it's very emotional, but it's also the start of something a lot more practical for people. It means that they will, have the same financial rights, medical rights, that they'll be able to get adoption rights too. And people see this as absolutely pivotal. I met one couple that have been waiting for this day for 32 years. Now, there is some way still to go. You hear people talking about the need for gender-neutral references to parent, not just mother and father. But nevertheless, Thailand is leading the way in Southeast Asia, and it wants to be seen as a welcoming haven for LGBT people.
OK, for now, thank you. Still to come on The Breakfast Show for you here on Sky News, we speak to the Church of England's first female black bishop about her journey from Montego Bay to the pulpit. What could Donald Trump's return mean for the UK's special relationship with the US? I'll ask the chair of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee, Emily Thornberry. And adventurer extraordinaire Jordan Wiley joins us ahead of his upcoming trip to Antarctica.
It's like a football final with only one team on the pitch. This isn't just a call to vote, but a call to remember. The freedom fought for by the African National Congress.
I'm Yusra Al-Bagher, Sky's Africa correspondent based in Johannesburg, South Africa.
A cyclone and 2 burst dams wiped out hundreds of generational homes.
This was the second dam that the floodwaters hit before it tore into Derna. We are in the heart of Nairobi, and we're watching as protesters were heavily tear gassed.
The sheer fearlessness and persistence of these guys is astonishing.
We help you understand the world with us. I remember going into the iconic Omdurman market in the heart of Sudan's capital for the first time since the war started. And this is what's left of it. Bullet holes through buildings, shelled balconies, bullet cases on the floor. I witnessed the complete destruction of a place linked to my childhood memories and the lives of millions of people. This is insane. This was a bustling residential area. So many friends who lived here. My most memorable interview was with a 15-year-old boy who'd survived being stranded on a migrant boat on its way from Senegal to the Canary Islands.
After 13 days, our food, water and fuel supply ran out.
I felt awe when we saw the mountain gorillas in Rwanda.
They call him the king of the jungle. This is the alpha silverback.
Sky News. Get the full story first. Yusra Al-Bagher, Sky News.
Weeknights on Sky News.
This is your chance. Tell people. Welcome to the Politics Hub.
Our police force has apologised. If you want to find out about Grimsby, you come to the docks.
I'm live in Jerusalem.
Are you not concerned that that could lead to all-out war?
Hello there, good evening. There are fears of an upsurge in violence. What's at stake here?
You are watching the press preview, a first look at the front pages as they arrive.
I'm James Matthews and I'm Sky's US correspondent, based here in Washington, D.C. Donald Trump, it would appear, is about to learn his fate. There's no doubting the strength of this hurricane as it roars through. Sky News, get the full story first. Do you fear a fourth indictment? Is it a draw?
He's from Sky News. He's from Sky News. He's entitled to ask me questions.
Hello again, everybody. Welcome back to The Breakfast Show. The Right Reverend Rose Hudson-Wilkin says if there's one thing she would like to see change in her lifetime, it's that accomplishments like hers stop being first and simply become normal. She's written a book about it. She's with us now, Bishop of Dover. Tell me about your life.
Oh, my goodness. Where do I start?
At the beginning.
I was lucky to have been born and brought up in Montego Bay, Jamaica. And I always say that I was lucky because there I could see images of myself in all walks of life. And so grew up knowing that I could become whatever I wanted to be. But within that, the sense of calling and the church saying, no, you're a girl, not possible. We don't have women as priests. And so it took a long time. But in between that, in childhood, growing up without my mother, which is not unusual because many parents left their children behind when they went off to the UK mostly, and then gradually they would bring up the children. We were left behind, and grew up with my father's sister, my father who was present but not engaged, as it were. And when my mother came here, she began a new family, and eventually we were taken to live with her when she returned to Jamaica, and that did not work very well. In my head, she is my mother, and she still is my mother. But because we were apart for so many years, I was 2 years old when she left Jamaica. So she was really, there were no emotional bonding there. And sadly, my experience of my mother was, someone who was constantly angry. She was very abusive.
Do you love her?
Oh, absolutely. Anyone who gives birth, my goodness, having given birth myself, to carry me and go through the pain of childbirth, I absolutely respect them. But yes, I love her. I have forgiven her. My faith has played a huge part in my life. My faith gave me purpose. It made me, in my childhood, when I felt that I was nothing, then suddenly, no, you are something. God loves you. Who is this God? And, if God thinks I'm of value and of worth, then I absolutely must be. And so I have lived into that, and it has made a huge difference in my life.
What makes you happy?
I don't know about happy. I know about joy. What gives me joy is knowing that I am loved by God and my family, and there are others, but also that I belong to one world and that I have a purpose, and that purpose is to be my brothers and sisters' keeper, to care for others, to be compassionate, to show forgiveness. All those things fills me with joy and purpose.
What makes you angry?
Oh, what makes me angry? I am outraged when I see injustice. I am outraged when I see a lack of compassion. And I want to make that right because deep in my heart, my faith is about justice and love and forgiveness and compassion.
And what do you say when people challenge you about God and how he can allow acts like, I don't know, the Southport murders to happen?
God, it's not God who did that. And sometimes we can put aside our own responsibility and blame God. And even people who don't believe in God still blames God. I think we must take responsibility for our actions. We must take responsibility sometimes about how we dehumanize others. And for example, climate change in our world, we must take responsibility for the damage that caused and the impact on people around us who are our brothers and sisters.
Justin Welby, what are your thoughts on what's happened?
Oh, deeply, deeply saddened. I do not believe he should have resigned. I did not want him to resign. He, in his very nature, felt that he ought to take some sort of corporate responsibility for the situation we find ourselves in. But I do want to say the changes that the church has seen with regards to safeguarding has been changes that has come about during his time in office. You know, we have independent, we have professional safeguarding officers right across the country. And it is because we're in a better place why we're saying, let's look back at historic cases like that of Smythe, Tudor, and I'm sure there will be more to come. Let's look back at that, see how we handled it, see what we need to make sure we do differently. So what we need to be engaged in now, we need to be engaged in looking at the recommendations and make sure we implement that. And so for me, it has been a travesty that we've wasted so much time around who should resign and signing petitions about that.
In a series of firsts in your life, could we see the first female Archbishop of Canterbury?
Absolutely not. I have no such desire. I want us, and I am certainly involved in praying and hoping that the church will get the right person and that the right person will be strong enough to withstand the fury that we seem to be engaged in with regards to those in positions of responsibility.
Don't you think we should be furious?
I think we should be enraged when there are injustices. I think we should be. I think we should be enraged that anyone is abused in the church, in our homes, in our communities. And let's be aware that issues of abuse happens right across the denominations, right across our country. It's not just for one group that does it.
Of course.
It happens right across. And in particular, one area, the abuse of women. Yesterday, I blessed a 90-year-old, Derek Downs, who was going to walk 90 miles for Oasis in order to fundraise for a charity that works with abused women. Every day in our country and in our world, women and girls are abused. And I want us to address that. Within our church, I want us to address that. I want us to address the kind of patriarchy, the kind of theological interpretation that allows us in all the various religions and in our society to abuse women. We must stop that. We must address that.
Name of the book?
The name of the book is The Girl from Montego Bay.
Fantastic. Fantastic. It's an absolute pleasure to speak to you this morning. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you for having me.
Meantime, I have to bring you some breaking news. Police have launched a murder investigation after the death of a woman in Plymouth. Devon and Cornwall police say officers were called at 8:55 last night after a woman in her 40s was found seriously injured in the street. The woman was taken to hospital but died in the early hours. Her next of kin have been informed. A large number of police units remain on the scene. We're told conducting extensive inquiries and searches in the area to locate a male suspect. The victim and suspect are believed to be known to each other. We'll get more information on that, and we will update you as soon as we can. In the meantime, still to come on The Breakfast Show, new year, new president. What does Donald Trump's return to the Oval Office mean for US-UK relations? Asking the chair of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee after the break. Donald Trump is back in the White House. How's that going to work with a Labour government? Nobody better to ask than Emily Thornberry, chair of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee. Good to see you. Thanks for taking the time to join us this morning. How are we going to work with Donald Trump?
Well, I think the first thing to do is to take a deep breath and to not take him literally, but to take him seriously. So there will be a lot of noise, there will be a lot of things that he will say, and then he won't say them again. And so I think the thing is, you know, I mean, like, he hasn't talked about Greenland again, you know, taking Greenland by force. That wasn't in his speech, in his inauguration speech. He seems to have kind of forgotten about that. You know, so just need to just keep calm, if possible. I mean, obviously, he's trying to shake up the world order. He's going to put America first. And I think what we need to do is work out where our interests align with his and say, right, for example, on Ukraine, we say, yeah, we want to have peace. Yeah, we want to have a deal. Absolutely. And you want to have a deal too. What we don't want is a loser's deal. And you don't want, as your first agreement internationally, to be part of a loser's deal. So let's think about what a winning deal looks like. And that means, for example, ensuring that Ukraine can continue on a path to joining NATO or the EU, if that's what it wants to do, because otherwise it's not a truly independent nation. And if you don't allow them to do that, then basically Putin's won. So you have to I think you have to sort of start talking in those terms, because in the end he wants to do deals.
Who is going to have those conversations for us? Because there is some suggestion that Lord Mandelson, who's the present pick to be the UK ambassador in the US, is not the right fit.
Well, I mean, he seems to have been the person who the Foreign Office has and the Prime Minister has decided ought to be our ambassador. And as far as I'm aware, that's going to happen. I don't think speculation further than that is very helpful.
He's been quite rude about Donald Trump, though, hasn't he?
Well, you know, so's the Vice President. I mean, didn't the Vice President say something about Donald Trump being the closest thing that America had to Hitler or something like that? I mean, you know, all's fair in love and politics.
So they say, And also, just talking about, going back to Ukraine for a second, he has told Putin that he needs to get a deal as well. So it's not just on one side, is it?
Well, also, I mean, again, it's another example of take him seriously but don't take him literally. He said that he was going to have a deal before he'd even got into office, and then he said he's going to have a deal on day one. And now he's sending messages to Putin saying, unless you agree to a deal, I'm going to put more sanctions on you, which is kind of what the last president did. So, you know, as I say, don't take him literally.
When I interviewed him, I did say, do you always believe what you say, or do you just do it for the headline? He said, no, I always believe what I say, but you don't necessarily think that's true.
Well, he might believe it at the moment he says it.
He does look as though he got the deal over the line in Gaza, though.
I think I've been thinking about this quite a lot. I think the truth is that the deal was there, unfortunately, for at least 6 months and had been agreed by everybody, including the negotiators, and then Netanyahu didn't sign it.
Yeah.
And the previous president kind of made that clear and was very disappointed. And I think for many people who I've been speaking to, their joy at a ceasefire is almost matched by their anger about it taking 6 months, because what's the excuse for it taking so long to sign? I mean, yeah, it may well be that a new president coming in and saying there'll be all hell to pay if those hostages aren't released, you know, and putting a lot of pressure on finally pushing Netanyahu over the line may have been what happened. Obviously, the concern is that he's come in and now he's lifted the sanctions against the violent settlers on the West Bank. And what we seem to be happening is that whilst we have a peace and unstable peace in Gaza, it's as if the Israeli government, the right-wing Israeli government, have now turned their attention onto the West Bank. They've closed down the West Bank. There's airstrikes going on. People can't get out of their towns. If they were in the wrong place when the order was to close towns and villages, they can't get home. And I think we have to watch the West Bank with great care. But the concern is that the lifting of sanctions may have been seen by Netanyahu as, yeah, you've got to have a ceasefire in Gaza, but you can have a bit of a free hand on the West Bank. And that's worrying for everybody, because that can be incredibly provocative, let alone, you know, the loss of life. But in terms of the long-term possibility of peace, it's very worrying.
The Middle East is a very different place, though, to when he was last in power.
Yes.
Thinking about Iran, the situation there, Saudi Arabia as well, of course. One wonders how he might handle that.
What I hope will happen is that people will look to how do we get a lasting peace? And obviously there needs to be a great deal of investment in Gaza to rebuild it. The Israelis won't want to do that. I'm assuming the Israelis don't want to stay in Gaza. Obviously that's a moot point with some of them. But before there can be the kind of investment that perhaps people will be looking to the Gulf states to invest, the Gulf states would want to know that there's security there and that they're not going to build things and it'll just get bombed again in 5 years' time. So I think that investment needs to be linked to a proper peace settlement that will lead to stability in the area, which basically nobody's come up with a better idea than a two-state solution, and that's what we need. We need to have a Palestinian state. So I think that's how it works. It's all these things linked together, and it needs to be part of a larger deal. And maybe Donald Trump coming in and being persuaded to be brave and forthright on this might be what is needed to push it on. Okay. I mean, being an optimist, I'm hoping that, that might be the way. And, then he gets his Peace Prize, which is what he wants.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you before I let you go. You're a very important and influential woman. Alaa Abd El Fattah is in jail. He's a British citizen, dual nationality, in jail in Egypt, and he's been there for a very long time.
Yes.
And he should not be in jail anymore.
Yes.
Even by the rule of law in Egypt, he should be out.
That's right.
By now. What are we going to do about it?
I'm concerned sometimes that what happens is that the British government doesn't always work in a coordinated way. So the Foreign Office may be clear that we want to have him out, and yet in the summer there was a trade fair with Egypt. And it seems as though we kind of give mixed messages sometimes. I think that it would be a great improvement to those who are arbitrarily held, British citizens around the world, if we did a bit more coordination. And what we need to have is somebody whose job it is, with a little department, with a little team, whose job it is to make sure that all government departments act the same way. It is in Britain's interest for people not to be held arbitrarily, and all government departments will support that, including trade. That, I think, would be an improvement that we need to make. Because, as I say, if you have David Lammy saying one thing and then something else seems to be happening, the Egyptians look and they just go, well, they're not serious about this.
Yeah. And in the meantime, his mother is on hunger strike.
Yeah.
It's great to see you as always. Thank you
Nice
very much
to see you.
indeed. Thank you. Still to come on The Breakfast Show for you here on Sky News after the break. Adventurer extraordinaire Jordan Wiley joins us ahead of his upcoming trip to Antarctica. We have all the details on Tina Turner's never-before-heard single, Hot For You, Baby. That's just been unearthed.
It's like a football final with only one team on the pitch. This isn't just a call to vote, but a call to remember. The freedom fought for by the African National Congress.
I'm Yusra Al-Bagher, Sky's Africa correspondent based in Johannesburg, South Africa.
A cyclone and 2 burst dams wiped out hundreds of generational homes.
This was the second dam that the floodwaters hit before it tore into Derna. We are in the heart of Nairobi, and we're watching as protesters were heavily tear gassed.
The sheer fearlessness and persistence of these guys is astonishing.
We help you understand the world with us. I remember going into the iconic Omdurman market in the heart of Sudan's capital for the first time since the war started. And this is what's left of it. Bullet holes through buildings, shelled balconies, bullet cases on the floor. I witnessed the complete destruction of a place linked to my childhood memories and the lives of millions of people. This is insane. This was a bustling residential area. So many friends who lived here. My most memorable interview was with a 15-year-old boy who'd survived being stranded on a migrant boat on its way from Senegal to the Canary Islands.
After 13 days, our food, water and fuel supply ran out.
I felt awe when we saw the mountain gorillas in Rwanda.
They call him the king of the jungle. This is the alpha silverback.
Sky News. Get the full story first. Yusra Al-Bagher, Sky News.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. A new start to Sunday. I'm ready. Are you? Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
This is the game changer seat. Look, it even comes with binoculars. Flying minutes, fly better. Thank you.
Look who's here. Jordan, extreme adventurer. What are you doing this time?
We're going to Antarctica, Kay, this time.
Why?
Two reasons. Firstly and foremost, to raise awareness and funds for the Army Cadet Charitable Trust. Army Cadets, incredible youth organisation, the nation's best kept secret in many ways, that do life-changing things for young people, and also to try and educate as many children as possible on the issues that Antarctica faces, working with a charity called 2041 Schools Champions of Antarctica, and we're trying to educate the little people to hopefully go on to protect it. We're going there to try and attempt to climb some unclimbed, pristine peaks, try and push the boundaries, test ourselves, and hopefully engage and inspire as many young people as possible over the next year. I'm
just reading your book, actually, Future-Proof, How to Navigate Your Life Through Values. That is for the Army Cadets, is it?
It is, yeah. So, yeah, thanks for the plug. Yeah. If anyone would like to get the book, all funds and profits when bought from the Army Cadets go directly to helping young people access those life-changing opportunities we're talking about.
OK. So how much money are you trying to raise, and what sort of training have you done?
Yeah, so I am trying to raise £100,000, which will do amazing things, as I say, for the young people. I've been very kindly sponsored by Dino Rod, so a bit of a different sponsor for me. We're going from the sewers to the summit, Kay, this time.
I see where you went with that.
With the leading sort of UK leading plumbing and service provider for drainage.
That's enough of a plug, thank you. That's enough of a plug. You'll get me in trouble. And how challenging has it been to prepare for it?
Well, I've started my training now, so got to lose all those Christmas puddings, and I'm going to be going to Sweden and Norway in the next couple of months to do some cold weather training, and obviously to start preparing. But I've been to Antarctica before. It's obviously the coldest, the windiest, the highest and driest continent on the planet, working with a company called Shackleton in the UK as well, named after the great Sir Ernest Shackleton, who are going to help me get in tip-top shape, ready for the expedition.
And do you have support when you're there, or are you going in it alone like you do normally, or what's the plan?
No, this time I'm being a little bit more sensible, so I'm going to be working with a polar expert from Shackleton, and also I'm going to take my little duck as well.
OK, tell me about the duck.
This is the duck, this is our mascot.
OK.
And I know that you like little pets, so I'm going to give this one to you.
Oh, thank you. That's correct. Yeah, I do. Thank you. That's amazing. Why has he got a golf tee? Oh, it's a golf tee, is it?
No, it's not. He's a plumber, isn't he?
Oh, he's a plumber. I was going to say, you're going to knock his head off doing that. Just remind our viewers who don't know, but most of them probably will, some of the other things that you've done previously. Yeah,
so lots of adventures. For me, it's not about what we do, it's about why we do it. You know, from climbing up mountains like Kilimanjaro barefoot to rowing across dangerous stretches of water, running cold marathons, dangerous marathons, hanging off the side of mountains. With you as well in the past, I must add.
Yeah, we did the three-peak challenge in 2320, just saying, didn't we? And also paddleboarding.
Yeah, attempted to paddleboard around Great Britain, but was unfortunately stopped after 149 days, 7 hours and 32 minutes. But we did amazing things because we raised lots and lots of money with your amazing support after your little cameo on the Celebrity Chase. We built a school in Africa, and we go back there every year. It's amazing.
And it's in Djibouti?
It's in Djibouti, and we're very proud of that project. We go there and take lots of teachers.
Old. When are you going to stop doing all this?
I am. I'm getting greyer, aren't I?
Yeah. When are you going to stop doing all this?
I don't know. I'm never going to stop. I love it. It gives me purpose, and I'm very passionate about using adventure to try and help and inspire young people. It's done great things for me. I always say that not all classrooms in the world have four walls. We learn so much from the great outdoors, and it's also great for our mental health and well-being as well, something which I've certainly struggled with, and that's how I manage it, I think.
And that's because, not least, because you were in the army, weren't you? And you had some challenging times there. Yeah,
like a lot of service personnel, lots of challenges adapting to civilian life, obviously some challenging experiences serving on the front line as a combat soldier, but for me it's the normal things in life that get us all down sometimes, the stresses and strains of relationships, work, and I just think with blue and green therapy, the ocean and the mountains, it's the best medicine. You can't, doctors need to prescribe that stuff.
Well, OK, well, you certainly have it in abundance. It's great to see you as well.
Thank you, Kay,
thank you very much indeed for coming on. Thank you. Thanks for the doc. The countdown is on to Hollywood's biggest night. The nominations for the 97th Academy Award will be announced this afternoon. I'm going to talk to Katie about that in just a moment. But first, let's listen to a new Tina Turner song. Katie's joining us. Tell us about the song, Katie. What's going on?
If you're a fan of Tina Turner, what a treat. This came as a bit of a surprise when this came out this morning to a lot of fans, I know. Look, it was originally written for the album Private Dancer, which of course was the big second act in Tina Turner's life, relaunching her career in 1984. It's 40 years on, so to mark that, they have unearthed this track that was written for the album, but in the end didn't make the final cut. You can you get an impression of why it didn't make the final cut, really. It's a good song, but if you think about the sort of rest of the tracks on that album, there's more of a sort of sultry tone to the rest of it. This is more a sort of classic 80s, bit of a sort of cheesy pop song, if you like. Even you wouldn't have heard it on that clip there, but it starts with a sort of 80s cowbell and sort of gets you into this proper sort of 80s vibe. But it's a wonderful pop song. It's great to have. But yeah, look, stacked up against sort of What's Love Got to Do with It and Private Dancer, you can see why it didn't make the final album, but nevertheless, it's Tina Turner, and what a treat to have on a Thursday morning.
Tell me about the Oscars.
We're going to find out this lunchtime who's nominated for the Oscars. Conclave, of course, dominated the BAFTA nominations last week. We suspect The Brutalist and Emilia Perez are going to be the films that are leading the way with the Academy, only because there's more of an American slant to those films. The Brutalist, this 3.5-hour film about a Jewish Hungarian architect who moves to America after World War II and restarts his life. Adrian Brody tipped to be the front runner, really, for Best Actor. But will Timothée Chalamet edge him out the way? We'll find out when the awards happen next month.
1:30, we'll know who the nominations are. Thanks very much indeed. Thank you. Just hearing, oh, goodness me, that there is a red weather warning that is going to be in place from 7 o'clock tomorrow morning in quite a lot of Wales. Flying debris resulting in danger to life, large waves and beach material, Northern Ireland, forgive me, being thrown onto coastal roads, seafronts and homes, forgive me. So we are being told that that is a challenge for the good people of Northern Ireland, forgive me, Northern Ireland from 7 a.m. tomorrow. You've been talking about that earlier, haven't you?
Yeah, and that follows a red weather warning for wind in the Republic of Ireland as well. That had existed for a few hours previously. We've been talking about the fact that this is a storm that's kind of originated in the US, made its way across the Atlantic and is now set to batter kind of western parts of the British Isles up into northwest Scotland as well. But like you say now, this red weather warning for wind, flying debris.
Yeah, and challenges with, I did mention Wales, challenges for the good people of Wales as well. It's Storm Eowyn. So just to let you know what they're suggesting with a red wind warning, flying debris, large waves, very dangerous driving conditions, power cuts affecting other services, damage to buildings and homes, roads, bridges and railway lines closed with delays and cancellations to bus, train, ferry services and flights. So that is the latest that we are hearing from the Met Office. Basically, stay indoors, don't go out. It isn't going to be safe to go out from 7 o'clock tomorrow morning in large parts of Northern Ireland. We will be back next week. Do stay tuned our way.
Weeknights on Sky News.
This is your chance. Tell people.
Welcome to the Politics Hub. Our police force has apologised. If you want to find out about Grimsby, you come to the docks.
I'm live in Jerusalem.
Are you not concerned that that could lead to all-out war?
Hello there, good evening. There are fears of an upsurge in violence. What's at stake here?
You are watching the press preview, a first look at the front pages as they arrive.